Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to the Pacific Islands Conference on Innovative Financing on Inclusive ICT and Education. My name is Toan and I will be the MC today. This conference is jointly organized by the UNESCO Asia Pacific Regional Bureau in Education and the Office for the Pacific States. Today, we have a fantastic lineup of speakers representing ministries of education, international development organizations, venture philanthropy networks, and a private sector. I hope you're ready for an insight-packed 3-hour webinar on how we can leverage innovative financing to enable ICT and education in the Pacific region and beyond. Before we get started, I would like to cover some housekeeping information. Kindly make sure that you have renamed yourself according to the syntax. This will help us to easily refer to your questions in the Q&A. A reminder that this webinar will be recorded and pictures will be taken. The recording will be uploaded to our YouTube channel for further viewing after the webinar is completed. For all speaker presentations and resources related to today's event, please visit our website at bit.ly/ICT-innovative-financing. Throughout the sessions, if you have any questions, please use the Zoom Q&A box. And lastly, before you leave today, please help us to answer the evaluation form that will pop up. This will help us to improve and develop more relevant events to you in the future. If you would like to keep regularly updated on ICT and education news and research in the region, please follow our social media channels with the following tags. And now on to the programming. I'd first like to welcome Mr. Nyi Nyi Thaung, Program Specialist in Education Planning and Management from the UNESCO Bangkok office to provide the opening remarks. Over to you, Nyi Nyi.
Thank you, Toan. Distinguished country delegates from the Pacific Island member states, His Excellency Sovaleni, Minister of the Education and Training Tonga, partner, field experts, and all other participants who are joining us online. Good morning and good afternoon. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the Pacific Island Regional Conference on Innovative Financing for Inclusive ICT in Education. Since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, we have seen social crises that have increased inequality, exclusion, discrimination, and global unemployment with potentially long-lasting effects. In the education sectors, this pandemic has led to a massive learning disruption which demand new methods of education delivery to take place. Although technology has been enabling force to ensure that learning never stops, the digital divide still remains a key issue, particularly for the marginalized learners. Closing the digital divide requires a holistic solution, including development in infrastructures, technology, teacher training, and the resources, all of which demand significant effort from the governments, private sector, donor, development partner, school, and community alike. In the Pacific region, significant progress has been made around enrollment in basic education, which we congratulate. And with the rapid development of ICT and broadband connectivity in the region, technological innovation has now become a promising solution to address the challenge in the provision of inclusive quality educations. However, financing gap has been one of the challenges that had delayed the progress of rolling of our ICT in education in the region. Inclusive development of ICT requires significant financial investments. So to ensure that ICT in education planning is a variable and sustainable, so we need to explore the innovative way to structure financing, partnership, and mobilizing resources. So that is why we are here today to discuss the topic of innovative financing for inclusive ICT in education. We need to look beyond traditional funding mechanisms and also partnership to alleviate financial resources to help build resilient and inclusiveness into the education system with ICT. Since 2017, UNESCO has been working with the Pacific Island member state to address the educational challenge through the strategic use of ICT. With generous support from the Korean Funding Trust, we have implemented projects to help build government capacity for integrating ICT into education system to support the achievement of the SDG 4 targets and goals of the country national education plan. This is one of the examples. We are also proud to have supported the development of ICT in education master plan in Solomon Islands, Maldives, and Kiribati, all of which have already been completed or are in the finalization stage. So in addition, important ICT planning and financing costing toolkit has been co-developed with the close collaboration with the government stakeholder to ensure that they are relevant in the context of their country in the region. So this development go along with the rapidly expanding ICT infrastructure in the region. It's laid the foundation, strong foundation to support the effective use of technology for addressing in the education challenge. So with this timely theme, we hope this conference will provide a forward-looking platform for education policymaker, development organization, private sector, partner, and the education stakeholder to share financial planning experience and bring a diverse perspective of innovative financing for ICT in education. I support that this conference will inspire engaging discussion with the improved practice to support successful ICT in education policy and financing planning. So we also hope that we will take this opportunity to connect with other guests, speaker, and partner to strengthen multi-stakeholder collaboration and partnership for the Pacific and beyond. So on this note, I also would like to thank Korean Funding Trust for their continuous support for our partnerships. And I wish you all for very productive and fruitful conference. Once again, thank you very much. Over to you, Toan. Thank you.
Thank you, Nyi Nyi, for your kind opening remarks. And from our UNESCO Office for the Pacific States and our co-organizer for this conference, may I ask Aya Aoki, Education Program Specialist, to provide the welcoming remarks. Over to you, Aya.
Thank you, Toan. Honorable Minister, distinguished delegates and participants, it is my great pleasure today to join my colleague Nyi Nyi in welcoming you to today's webinar, Innovative Financing for Inclusive ICT in Education. ICT in education has always been an important topic in the Pacific, while the role of ICT in education is expanding and the efforts to enhance online and blended learning availability in response to COVID-19, as Nyi Nyi has shared. Some of the Pacific countries have accelerated the work to prepare multimedia teaching and learning modalities, including student home study packages, online worksheet and other materials, radio broadcast on lessons such as numeracy, free TV broadcast on education lessons, and use of social media platforms to share learning resources. In this context, UNESCO has been supporting the Pacific countries and in developing and expanding learning management platforms, which you will hear more about later on this seminar. In this effort to use of ICT in education, I'd like to emphasize the importance of ensuring these ICT access to all, in particular, those who are in remote geographic areas coming from low socioeconomic status, both boys and girls, ethnic minorities, and those with disability. Most of the Pacific countries continue to have internet connectivity and other technological constraints, especially in outer islands and remote locations. How to make ICT available for those populations through innovative partnerships and financing will be one of the topics to be discussed today. The Pacific Regional Education Framework, or PACREF, seeks to empower Pacific Islanders fully enjoy without barriers the benefit of education and to promote fully inclusive learning opportunities. PACREF operationalizes the commitments by the Pacific countries to raise the quality of education across the Pacific, to enhance learners' education outcomes, and to contribute to build human capital who are able to contribute economically and socially to their communities. PACREF encompasses 4 key policy areas, namely quality and relevance, learning pathways, student outcomes and well-being, and the teaching profession. ICT in education plays a role in advancing each of these policy areas. In improving education quality and relevance, ICT can contribute to enhance quality learning environment that supports learning at all levels of education. It would also help enhance pedagogy by expanding options for teaching and learning modalities, which in turn intends to contribute to better learning outcomes. In ensuring learning pathways for all, ICT could contribute to track and report national and subnational education data to inform policies and strategies. Leveraging and expanding the use of ICT as an access tool to education can also contribute to expanding learning pathways. To enhance student outcomes and well-being, contribution of ICT may be related to in the use of continuous assessment to gauge learning outcomes and adjust teaching and learning as needed, as well as building the capacity of learners in the areas of information and digital literacy. Supporting teaching profession is another area of priority in PACREF. In this area, ICT can assist to support teachers and school leaders in developing new skills and knowledge to contribute to better outcomes for students. I look forward to learning from countries, partners, and participants today to collectively gain knowledge and discuss ways forward on this important topic. I hope you will all enjoy this conference today. Thank you.
Thank you, Aya, for your pointed reminders about the context of the region and how we can achieve inclusive education, as well as a reminder of the PACREF and its priorities. Ladies and gentlemen, we are also honored today to welcome the Honorable Excellency Siaosi Sovaleni, Minister of Education from the Kingdom of Tonga, to share his perspective on the relevance of the ICT in education to the context of his country and within the Pacific region. To avoid any disruptions from connectivity issues, he will be joining us by video recording. So please join me in viewing the keynote speech from His Excellency Siaosi Sovaleni.
Honorable Ministers, Head of Delegations, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Malolele and greetings from the Kingdom of Tonga. In 2018, the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat Education Ministers adopted the Pacific Regional Education Framework, otherwise known as PACREF, as a key regional strategy on education development. This framework outlined a transformative and sustainable regional education agenda aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals number 4 to be achieved by 2030. In alignment with the SDGs, PACREF and the Tonga Strategic Development Framework 2, Tonga strives to achieve lifelong learning and education to develop better global citizens. In the past years, the Education Policy Framework 2004-2019 has guided the comprehensive reform and the improvement of our education system, focused on access to quality of universal basic education, catering for the different abilities and needs of students, and improvement to the administration of education and training. We also consider the needs of the labor force and the early childhood care and education as priority areas. For example, access to government ECE learning increased from 1% in 2019 to 28% in the most recent counts. Nationally, access to ECE has been raised from 30% in 2019 to 45% in 2020. After having achieved a long-standing tradition of providing virtually universal access to free primary education, Tonga now looks beyond formal education system to include other aspects of human resource development in the country. It also extended free basic education from year 6 to year 8. In 2020, the ministry established a new division called the Education Data Intelligence Division to strengthen monitoring such as daily attendance, truancy and dropouts, and the absence of teachers to measure potential impact on student learning. This division also looked at improving the Electronic Management Information System, or EMIS, focusing on student profiles and assessments. There is also ongoing work on social media policy and ICT in education policy. We recognize that ICT is a powerful tool to achieve sustainable economic development and inclusive and equitable quality education. In 2010, through the Tonga Declaration, along with Pacific ICT ministers, we declare our commitments to using ICT as a key tool for sustainable development, governance, and also sustainable livelihood of the people of our countries in the Pacific. Since then, a national infrastructure investment plan was developed in 2010, emphasized the development of telecommunication infrastructure. Investment in 2013, developing more than 800 kilometers of underwater fiber submarine cable linking Tonga to Fiji to help increase broadband internet access and affordability. And then an e-government unit was set up in 2015, and the Tonga Computer Emergency Response Team, or Tonga said, was established in 2016. Last year, the COVID-19 pandemic also brought new educational challenges in the Pacific region. While Tonga is still COVID-free, we continue to abide by stringent global and government rules and policies to avoid entry of the disease into the country. At the same time, we recognize the global education disruption brought on by the pandemic and the increased importance of remote, online, and distant learning modalities to ensure that learning never stops. The ministry fast-tracked developing online teaching and learning materials in preparation for the closure of schools. We staged trials in school to familiarize teachers and students with multimodal means of teaching and learning delivery through radio, television, print, and internet. Parents were also encouraged to support their children for this home study program. The trials prepare us in the event that COVID-19 enters Tonga and the schools must close. Furthermore, the ministry was also approved for funding under the GPE, or the Global Partnership for Education program, to develop a national project to provide some teachers with laptops and training to be able to develop audiovisual and online resources for teaching of students, especially in the event that we have to close down schools. Despite these successes, there is still much work to be done in Tonga to ensure inclusive ICT in education. We require comprehensive development of infrastructure, resources, teachers, and raising awareness of parents to ensure that we can adequately prepare students to deal with the opportunities and potential risks of the digital era. In Tonga, the number of students interested in computing has increased, requiring upgrading of equipment and facilities, and making teaching of ICT compulsory in schools. The ministry needs to reduce the students to computer ratio so that all students will have better access to computers. Right now, some high schools still have a ratio of 30 students to one computer, and it's still have 30 students to one computer in its computer laboratory. As you are aware, in the Pacific, remoteness of schools and unreliability of electricity in small islands, unstable reliability of submarine fiber connectivity, lack of ICT literate teachers also make it difficult to effectively use ICT. We need creative solutions and partnership to increase the affordability of connectivity and to make optimal use of ICT. There are opportunities here to use green and sustainable solutions, for example, renewable energy in remote islands, to facilitate the use of ICT to address some of these challenges. From a financing perspective, ICT in education requires costly investment in many necessary inputs, including infrastructure, equipment, ongoing human capacity building, updated curriculum, new pedagogies, especially using ICT. With 84% of the ministry annual budget spent on personnel, such as salaries and wages, only 16% are available for operational and maintenance costs for program areas ranging from ECE to higher education. This makes it very difficult to initiate new projects or programs, including for ICT in education. This also makes it difficult to innovate, as we do not want to potentially waste any of our limited resources. These gaps and constraints require partners and government to strengthen cooperation, which are critical to the success of PPRD and achieving the SDG 4 targets in the Pacific. On this note, I would like to commend and thank UNESCO for its continued support in the region and to Tonga. UNESCO's support to address the impact of COVID-19 through distance learning and access to quality digital learning materials by all, such as the platform Wakamwana Regional Learning Management platform in the Pacific Seas. This has helped to enhance resilience and versatility of educational delivery and increase access to quality learning materials by all, as well as to cope with future crises. Challenges such as digital divide and unequal access to digital learning and cheating materials require creative solutions, including student home study packages, distance learning, online learning, through the use of radio, televisions, and the internet, and staggered opening of the schools. The project to enhance capacity in education management information systems, or EMIS, has helped in obtaining accurate data to track progress in education, such as net enrollment and literacy rate, data analysis, and using data in education planning. Achieving our education goals would require this critical data for close monitoring and collective resource mobilization. Furthermore, UNESCO's support to thrive to integrate ICT into education for policy planning and financing are highly relevant in the context of this region and the digital era that we have been thrust into. The master plans and experiences that have been developed across the region provide valuable lessons that can be shared at conferences such as this. We should take this unique opportunity to learn from each other and build strong constructive partnership so that we can innovate and effectively address the challenges and exploit the opportunities in our Pacific. I truly appreciate the opportunity to provide this keynote speech and look forward to working with you to drive inclusive ICT in education in the Pacific. Malo Aupito.
Thank you to the Honorable Minister for sharing his insights and on the importance of how governments and partners need to work together to truly make transformative use of ICT in education. In my 4 years of working with UNESCO, this has been a clear message to me. It takes time, commitment, and consistent action to ensure that we can make the benefits of ICT inclusive for all students and that no one gets left behind. So it's my pleasure to also be presenting in this first session of the day to provide an overview of the project that UNESCO has been implementing over the last few years to support inclusive ICT in education in the Pacific region. Just a couple of seconds as we pull up the presentation. Okay. All right. So I'll be providing some context and background for the project that UNESCO has been implementing, as well as sharing the process and key products that we have developed to support financial planning for technology-enabled education. In 2019, the UN Secretary General called upon all countries and partners to accelerate action towards the Sustainable Development Goals. His message was simple. We are not advancing at the speed or scale required to meet the SDG goals. With less than 10 years remaining, this decade must be a decade of ambitious actions, globally and locally, and amongst all stakeholders, to generate the momentum and transformation that are needed. In line with this message, leading experts in international development are adamant that there is a critical role for digital technology to support and accelerate the achievement of the SDG goals. Within the region, SDG 4 has made the most progress. However, we are still quite far away, as you can see in the chart on the right. Further to this, COVID-19 has been the greatest disruption in the history of education, impacting 94% of the world's population. In the Asia-Pacific region, more than 752 million learners were affected. The impact in terms of learning loss, potential dropouts of students who may never return to the education system, and its effects in their quality of lives are significant. Not to mention the challenges that it poses to achieving SDG 4. During this global pandemic, we witnessed the increasing and evident value of ICT in education as schools move to remote and online teaching modalities. In terms of the future of education, it's no question that technology has a strong role to play. Yet, we've also been reminded of the huge divides that exist across countries in terms of the ability and readiness to participate in this increasingly digitalized world. According to the World Bank, more than half of the global citizens are still not included in the digital economy. While the goal of technology-enabled education is enticing, there are several challenges to achieving inclusive ICT in education in the region, particularly the digital divide and limited internet connectivity. As seen in the figure on the right, the PICs have relatively low rates of internet access. While more accessible forms of ICT can include radio and television, even still, only less than 50% of households have these technologies. There's also a lack of access to basic utilities such as stable electricity on outer islands, which is likely to leave rural populations disconnected. Ultimately, this lack of connectivity affects the unequal distribution of the benefits of technology and exacerbates the very systems that perpetuate poverty and inequality. From the financing perspective, the lack of effective and sustainable financing was identified as key challenges to enabling ICT in education in the region. Firstly, ICT in education significantly increases requirements for financing, which places pressures on already limited government resources. Particularly in this region, there are limited economic resources, which are then met with high costs for equipment and infrastructure. Furthermore, the distance and remoteness of islands increase the cost of provisions of these services. Secondly, there's a lack of sustainability of financing for ICT in education. While there have been many pilots and initiatives in the region, there are still challenges in continuing or scaling these projects due to the lack of follow-on funding. Due to the environmental factors, ICT equipment may also have a shorter life cycle, putting more pressures on financing. And lastly, challenges with developing, due to low population, there are challenges to develop feasible business cases for investments. Taking these factors and financing challenges into account, UNESCO has been supporting the development of ICT in education in the region through the project titled Innovative Financial Planning in Technology-Enabled Education to achieve SDG 4 in the Asia Pacific. This project has been made possible with the generous support from the Republic of Korea's Funds in Trust, and seeks to support members to develop a holistic and systemic approach to financing and costing for ICT in education. With this project, we are supporting the achievement of SDG 4 in 3 ways. First, supporting the development of national ICT in education policies. These documents set out the strategic vision and structure to support the integration of ICT within the education system. Second, we've developed financial planning and costing resources to improve the capacity of policymakers to accurately cost and finance ICT in education projects. And lastly, we support the development of partnerships to mobilize necessary resources for the implementation of these ICT in education policies. Within the first component of this project, UNESCO provides technical support to countries, which consists of 2 key steps. The situational analysis seeks to gather data and understand the realities on the ground in terms of educational outcomes, school and teacher readiness, and perspectives of stakeholders. This helps to contextualize the policies so that they are most relevant to the needs of the country. Secondly, we provide capacity development workshops and technical assistance in the development of the actual master plans. This is typically a one-year process that aims to engage with multiple stakeholders, ministries, and partners to ensure commitment towards the policies, but also proper financing for its implementation. As part of this current project, Kiribati and Maldives were supported to develop their ICT and education master plans. The project started with the national workshops in 2019, but was delayed due to the impact of COVID-19. Despite the delays, both countries have endured and made strong progress, and both are in the finalization stages of their master plans. The second component of this project is the development of financial planning and costing tools for ICT and education. In engaging with policymakers from the beneficiary countries, we identified three specific needs. First, to identify appropriate cost-effective models. Second, to structure guidance on costing in ICT and education. And third, to engage with key partners. Taking these requirements, we developed a financial planning resource, which I will go into further details in the following slides. Now, to provide some context, in 2018, as part of a previous project, UNESCO developed the ICT and Education Policy Planning Guide, which serves as a toolkit to complement our technical support to countries. The PPG, in short, is broken down into 5 modules that guide policymakers to complete the key components of an ICT and Education master plan. This resource can be accessed and used interactively on our website in the link shown on the side, as well as be downloaded to be used in a no bandwidth situation. To supplement the policy planning guide, the interactive financial planning resource was developed. This contains a 5-step costing action planner that assists policymakers to create accurate and realistic estimates for ICT and education projects. I will now go into some of the key features of the financial planning resource. One key comment that we often heard from policymakers was that they wanted to learn about the process and rationale for costing of ICT and education projects. Taking UNESCO's experience and position in engaging and supporting master plans in various countries, we developed interactive case studies as a key feature for this tool. These case studies allow users to view real examples of projects from other countries, as well as see the approaches that they have taken towards costing. The success of a project must start with an accurate understanding of the needs and requirements. Yet, this was another challenge we have often observed in the planning of ICT and education. Costs were often not accurately reflecting the total cost of ownership, which includes initial costs, recurring costs, and also hidden costs that are needed for the successful and sustainable implementation. Thus, an interactive cost calculator was developed. It first alerts users of the various costs that are often associated with projects for ICT. And then it provides an interactive calculator so that they can develop realistic costs for their projects. When it comes to costing of ICT in education, many countries will find that costs start to quickly get out of hand. The cost of a master plan can outpace the resources available, and thus only certain projects can be implemented, and the master plan may not fully meet its intended goals. By seeing the actual cost of projects, policy planners are given feedback on what needs to be adapted, changed, removed, or combined so that master plans can be most effective and efficient. And that is a key feature of the Costing Action Plan. This feature is a collation of lessons learned from other countries, recommendations, and reflection questions that will prompt policy planners to properly prioritize the cost of ICT and education projects. Beyond these three key features, the FPR also contains key resources for costing and financing. It is a free public tool for policymakers and governments and other partners involved in the ICT and education policy planning. I suggest you can check it out at the website that we provided, and you will also find the link on our webpage and in my presentation afterwards. And now moving on to the last component of this project, to build partnerships and knowledge sharing. This Pacific Islands Regional Conference aims to be a key platform for sharing knowledge on ICT and education in the region, and specifically on the topic of innovative financing. We hope that you'll be able to gain ideas and build relationships that can turn into partnerships further down the road. Later today, you will also hear from the preliminary findings of our research on the topic of innovative financing, which was developed in preparation for this conference and engaged key finance and ICT and education stakeholders in the region. Several of the organizations and participants are shown here, and I thank them for their support. In conclusion, I hope that this brief presentation has provided you with an overview and overall understanding of UNESCO's support for ICT and education and financing, and where we fit within the larger ecosystem. Should you have any questions or seek for support, please reach out to us in the information on this slide. Thank you. And now back to my regular MC duties. In this next session, we will welcome officials from 3 countries who have been engaged in the project that I just presented. Specifically, this session will share lessons learned in the development of national ICT and education policies and how they have helped in the response to COVID-19. First, we welcome Ms. Reetina Katokita, Director of the Policy Planning Research and Development Unit from the Ministry of Education in Kiribati. Also, due to connectivity issues, Reetina has provided a video recording. However, she's here to participate in the Q&A that we will have afterwards.
Warm greetings from Amelie Highland. It is one of the out islands in the Republic of Kiribati. Apologies that the presentation is a recorded version, but I hope it is clear and loud enough for everyone to listen to. While I am still on the out island, I am grateful for this opportunity, and I would like to thank UNESCO for the invitation to present during this regional conference. The presentation is on the Kiribati ICT and Education Master Plan. What are the experiences and the lessons learned from the plan development undertaking? Prior to going further with the presentation, it is crucial to note Kiribati developed this ICT and Education Master Plan with the financial and technical support of UNESCO. I trust in the course of this presentation, you will be able to learn 3 key foci of the presentation that include how the ICT in education policy responds to COVID-19, what progresses have been made, and the outputs that are targeted, how the innovative financing of the activities in the plan have been considered. In the second slide, it presents an overview of how the education structure looks like in terms of the school levels that start from the early childhood education, going up to the primary level, the junior secondary, the senior secondary, and at the top here are the tertiary and the TVET education levels. You can also see the breakdown of the number of schools at each education level, and also the student population being disaggregated by gender, and the breakdown of the number of male and female teachers as well. And down here are the totals. What happened to education in the wake of COVID-19? There had been 2 occasions that the teaching and learning schedules and processes had been affected. First, in April 2020, when the nearby countries like Fiji had a case. The second incidence of COVID-19 was just recent on the 17th of May this year, when 1 case was discovered on a fishing vessel anchored in the Kiribati shores. Fortunately, there has been no case of school closure, but the school calendar was affected and thus amended. The schools went on early term breaks. Even the ECCE schools went on a break longer than scheduled. They went back on at a later schedule. The teaching and the learning mode changed from school-based to home-based for a few days, and this change applied to all 23 primary and secondary schools on the capital island, South Tarawa. The logic framework of the ICT in Education Master Plan displays the vision is geared around learners in Kiribati are empowered through inclusive use of ICTs to face the challenges of the digital era. The vision is further broken down into 3 goals, those that focus on 3 key result areas: infrastructure, human resource, and education management information system. The key result areas have programs and projects. All these projects are costed. The total cost is more than 9 million to ensure the plan can be well implemented to realize the goals and to achieve the vision as mostly anticipated by the end of this plan tenure. Let me put up to all your attentions the ICT in Education Master Plan aligns well with both the national and international policies. For example, in the ICT Master Plan, under the infrastructure result area, the project includes devices, connectivity, and electricity will be provided. This project supports the Sustainable Development Goal Target 4A1 that says proportion of schools with access to electricity, internet, and computers. Another example of the plan alignment is with the Asia-Pacific Regional Strategy on using ICT to facilitate the achievement of the Education 2030. In the Asia-Pacific Regional Strategy, member states are to develop ICT in education policies. And in the ICT Master Plan, under the Human Resource Result area, administration policy will also be developed. One very important alignment of the ICT Master Plan is with the current education sector strategic plan. The ICT Master Plan is not developed to be employed on its own, but it will support the education sector strategic plan to achieve relevant goals. How the ICT in the Education Master Plan plays a role in responding to COVID-19. This is reflected in the number of projects or activities included in the plan. The Kiribati government has a national COVID-19 preparedness and response plan. Aligning to this national plan, the Ministry of Education also developed its COVID-19 contingency plan. Both the government and Ministry of Education plans are supported well by the activities in the ICT Master Plan in all 3 levels of actions for COVID-19. Under the preparedness phase, the plan supports this phase via these project to activities. And the same for the response phase. These specific project to activities in the ICT Master Plan supports how education can respond to COVID-19. The recovery and the system strengthening phase is supported by these projects. Enhanced schemes for the monitoring and evaluation of what has been done to inform decisions for next actions, and the ICT policy development and research to inform system strengthening and resilience. The slide presents few examples on key targets of the plan. The table clarifies all in terms of the key results area, the program, the project, and the key targets and the timelines to achieve them, or how much work has been done for the target. It is kind of an update on what Kiribati has developed as part of the project. And it is crucial to note some projects in the master plan are part of the government's priorities and manifestos. Thus, work on them have already commenced. As noted on how the financing mechanisms are constructed, it involves 3 levels of process: central government, the ministry and the donor levels. Between the three levels, communication is made to ensure the information and the budget needs reach each level. At the ministry level, it is important that planned and costed activities are reflected on something that we call DOP, or Divisional Operational Plan. So funding can be made available. The DOPs inform the ministry overall budget, which is approved at the government level. The DOP also inform donor support. And for activities that are not reflected on the DOPs, provisions for them can be made through use of savings, as noted in the right side of the slide. Or project documents are developed to lobby for funding from the government project funds or from potential donor partners. Partnership has been noted a crucial component of the plan implementation. For the implementation of the ICT in Education Master Plan, key partners needed are line ministries, non-government organizations, external and donor partners, and private sectors. And the table here displays possible areas that can be useful for each partner to work on. The implementation of the plan, of course, will involve resource mobilization, in particular to all our schools across Kiribati. Mobilization is already a big challenge. Seeing the islands are scattered geographically, some islands are quite remote. I believe most of you are aware that traveling between some of the islands in Kiribati can take up to 9 days by boat and can be more if it is bad weather. Even it takes and costs to go via Fiji. If you are to go to the islands in the line and Phoenix groups by plane. So an approach to ensure mobilization of resources is possible if we will work with our stakeholders on each island. We have the island education offices and also the island council on each island. A memorandum of understanding will be required for each partner to agree with them on what roles each is expected to do for resource mobilization. In addition to what had been shared in previous slides, the plan approval is crucial. Cabinet awaits our submission on the plan to table its endorsement. We hope to have the plan approval within this month. And once approved, the launching and dissemination and awareness raising will follow. And implementation of activities can proceed once funding are made available. One of the pressing activities is to increase coverage of and accessibility to internet and connectivity. As you can note, not all of our students access connectivity yet. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Reetina. The Kiribati Master Plan has been a timely initiative. It is one of the first master plans in the region to be developed and has integrated lessons from COVID-19. And I'm sure it'll be a great example to other countries. Up next, Solomon Islands was part of the first countries that this project supported and completed its ICT in Education Master Plan in 2019. Since then, it has made strong progress in implementation. And today we have Joe Ririmae, Deputy Secretary of Corporate Services, and Peter Suiramo, ICT Manager from the Ministry of Education and Human Resources Development in Solomon Islands, who will share some of their lessons learned. Over to you, Joe and Peter.
Good afternoon from the Solomon Islands to you all. We will present it together, and Peter will be talking mainly about ICT education overview. and he will be speaking about the whole of the presentation. I will just do the overview of national response to COVID in education. But just before we go into that, I would like to acknowledge the opportunity that is given to us to share with you in terms of how we are implementing the ICT master plan that was held and developed by UNESCO for the Solomon Islands. You see now slide? We are just checking. You see our slide or? Hello?
Yes, we can see it now.
That's right. Thank you so much. We will try as much as possible to be within the 10 minutes time frame.
Thank you.
We'll try that. The Ministry of Education and University Development in the Solomon Islands response to COVID-19. Our response to the COVID-19 is done in a strategic plan. We have developed a strategic plan to actually respond to the COVID-19. We are fortunate at the moment that we are COVID-free, and we acknowledge the system that the government has provided to actually prevent and protect the COVID-19 to go into the communities. So in terms of the scenario planning that we have developed 4 scenarios just in case on how we're going to address the COVID-19 if it comes into the Solomon Islands and it goes out to the communities. So scenario 1 is on schools reopen and resume normal operations. And we have key domains and implementable actions that we to do if schools reopen and resume normal operations. The scenario 2 is on when the school is closed, which is reflected there. All the schools were closed down on 30th March 2020, and all classes resumed on 25th May 2020, which is about a month that we closed the schools. How we're responding to this based so much on the school closed. The school calendar was also adjusted in terms of the teaching for the year because we have closed down the schools for a month. So we have extended the school curriculum year into December just to cover the curriculum content for the year. We also have repatriation of students from the schools to the provinces in the Solomon Islands to go back to the various villages. Most of the education authorities were informed through internet connectivity on important advice during this COVID-19, and that is one of the things that Peter will talk more about, how we have done that in terms of the connectivity to the education authorities, in terms of the connectivity. We also do continuing teaching and learning continuity program during the time that the school was closed. We used the main media in the Solomon Islands that has the bigger coverage to a good number of the provinces in the Solomon Islands, the Solomon Islands Broadcasting Corporation, which is supported by the donors, as well as the Solomon Islands government. We also have, iLearn Resource, which is one of our portal tool, which is one of the key components in this ICT master plan. We downloaded all the curriculum resources into that resource portal that can be accessed anywhere throughout the Solomon Islands, as long as there's connectivity for the teachers as well as the students to access the website. Peter will mention something about the challenge that we have in terms of connectivity, but the resource portal was used to share all the curriculum resources online, as well as information to parents also shared on that site, as well as free additional learning materials during COVID-19 was shared on that site, as well as advice regarding cyber safety is also shared, as well as COVID-19 health standards that should be upheld across the provinces as well as the schools in the Solomon Islands. And currently we are fortunate to use ICT equipment for virtual meetings The COVID-19 is disrupting a lot of programs and activities that we are implementing, but on the other side, it also reinforces some opportunities that we can go into. And some of the schools in the Solomon Islands, they have been connected and they can do virtual meetings in the rural village. Theme in terms of the infrastructure and ICT expansion to the schools in the rural areas. So I will hand over to Peter to go over the ICT in education overview and the other parts. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Joe, for that. I'll take you through the ICT in education master plan. It's a 5-year plan. This ICT master plan was aligned to the National Education Action Plan, as well as the National ICT policy. So this is the vision of the ICT master plan is to ensure the children of the Solomon Islands are equipped with the skills and confidence to move on into the 21st century. Now the mission is to improve equitable access and management towards equality and it was supported by ICT. Now there are 3 goals in this ICT master plan. The first one is to enhance ICT infrastructure and connectivity to facilitate equitable access to learning. And then the second goal is to create an effective teaching and learning environment supported by quality digital resources and pedagogy. And the final goal is to enhance EMIS to improve effectiveness and efficiency of education management resources. Now, this ICT master plan has 4 key components. The first one is iConnect. And under this iConnect, the main programs or projects is to develop ICT infrastructure in the country. That is to connect all the schools and the education authorities. Now, under this iConnect, there are 3 projects. The first one is and then the second project is to equip the secondary schools with ICT devices. And then the final project is to provide connectivity for all the secondary schools. That's under this iConnect. So far, there are a good number of outcomes. We have managed to connect all the education authorities. That was in 2019. So we managed to complete all the education authorities in all the provinces.
Just a reminder, we're at 2-minute mark.
The second project is using ICT for teaching and learning. We have 2 projects here. That is ICT competency frameworks for teachers. And the second one is training in basic ICT skills and ICT enhanced pedagogies. The third one is iManage. That is to enhance EMIS for better decision making, communication and management. Previously, we have this SIMIS, Solomon Islands Education Management System. And now we have this new open EMIS supported by UNESCO. So currently there are good, we have this project is currently ongoing and there are developments is going on. And then we have the final component is the iResources. For this iResources, we have secondary digital learning resources. It's currently online. And then we have the primary school resources. It's currently online. So this is one of the achievements. So we will continue to update these iResources as time goes on. And during this COVID-19 era, this iResources is one of the platform that the ministry was using to provide learning resources to our schools. And this is the costing components of this this master plan. The first, that's the component 1. It's around, for PEAs, the cost is 2.2 million. School devices is around 30 million, and school connectivity is around 5.3 million. These are the estimated costs for each of these projects. For component 2, ICT competency framework, it's around 22,000. These are all in Solomon Islands. In service training, it's 750,000. For component 3, for the online portal, the iResources, it's around 20,000. And for offline distribution modes to be considered. And then for component 4, we are upgrading the open EMIS. It's around 1.7 million. That's the estimated budget. And for EMIS capacity development, it's around $555. And then the last part is EMIS communication. It's 1.35 million. So in total, it's approximately around 43 million BD. So that was the total cost for this master plan. The next component is financing mechanisms. Solomon Islands government funding through its current budget. So this is the financing component of this master plan. We use this SIG recurrent budget. And also we have funding support from donors. These donors, they support us with the financing part of this master plan. In terms of partnership, these are the partners that help us with this ICT master plan development. So we have this ICT ICT support unit from the Ministry of Finance and Treasury. We have the Ministry of Aviation and Communication. We have the Solomon Islands National University and Solomon Telecom. We have SATSOL, UNESCO, donors, partners, DFAT and MFAT, and SPC. So these are our partners that support us with the development of this ICT master plan. For resource mobilization, we procure some computers for the schools and education authorities. We support them with these ICT equipments. Now, our next step now is we want to improve access to learning resources through the iResources. So that's one of our next focus. We have this digital resources online, so we want to put more learning resources so that our students can have access to them. In terms of infrastructure, we will continue to liaise with the Ministry of Aviation and Communication, and other ISPs in the Solomon Islands. So infrastructure is like it's a national issue. So we need a collaborative approach from these other stakeholders. And also we want to roll out this open EMIS to the schools. So currently this open EMIS is, the development is continued. So once it completes, and then our next target now is to roll over the open EMIS to the provinces and the schools. Also, we want to increase training of teachers on ICT equipment and the open EMIS. That's another focus. And then the final one is to digitalize all the teaching and learning resources. Once we have all these digital resources, and then we can put them on our iResource for the students and teachers to access them. Yes, I think because of the time constraints, that's all we can share with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe and Peter, for your presentation. It is a great opportunity for us to reflect on your experiences in developing the master plan before the COVID era, and then see how useful it has been in supporting ICT and education initiatives since. While Maldives is not a country from the Pacific region, there are still many geographical similarities. It is an island country with 20 atolls and 1,192 islands, 187 which are inhabited. The Maldives is part of this project to review its previous 5-year master plan and is currently finalizing its second ICT and education master plan. Like Kiribati, it will also be one of the first countries in the region to develop a master plan within the context of COVID-19. Up next, we invite Moosa Adam, Senior Policy Director from the Ministry of Education in Maldives, to share about their lessons learned. Over to you, Moosa.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you well.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, and a very good morning and good afternoon to you all. Hi, my name is Moosa, and the Senior Policy Director from Ministry of Education. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to present our experience ICT in education, and especially during the pandemic. Before I proceed, I would like to thank UNESCO for the continued support, especially in the development of ICT master plan in education. As for the impact of ICT in education, the COVID-19 hit across the nation actually in 4 waves, and currently now we are in the 4th wave. Over 90,000 students and 10,000 teachers in over 250 schools. In the first wave itself, all the schools across the nation were closed for over 3 months. And even at this moment, the 4th wave, which has hit kind of hardest at the moment out of the 4 waves, this is the critical time, I mean the most critical time here in the Maldives. Here 80 schools are now closed and approximately 50,000 students. So learning hours has been reduced across the nation, even for the schools who are open, and foundation and primary students are like the most affected students, and there is a huge impact on the private school and their students due to the economic impact. The major responses with regard to the COVID-19 that we have prepared an education response plan. The academic calendar has been extended to another 6 months. The curriculum was condensed, and during the pandemic, we have been practicing 3 models of learning, which is the physical, online, and the teleclasses. Provision of mobile data to student, and conducted its study on the key indicator of the education response plan. Of course, ICT has played a very significant role, and especially during the pandemic. All these classes during the school closure is conducted through Google Workspace, mainly through Google Classroom and Google Meet. Maldives was kind of lucky enough to provide the tablets to all the students, like over 75,000 students, before the pandemic. So each student had a device for them to get engaged, and each student were given the username and the password to engage in learning, the G Suite, the Google for Education. So this helped us to conduct all the administrative meetings, and the office work being done from home. Teachers prepared lessons for telecasting. We also got an award actually for the teleclasses, which is, I mean, the teachers use their smartphones to prepare the video lessons, and it is sent to the national television station to be telecasted across the nation. So and social media platforms played a huge role actually in terms of disseminating the information and sharing the information. So I think those are the main ways in which the ICT played. With regard to the some specific achievements in the area of ICT during the COVID-19, we were able to kind of conduct a survey to identify the access and the access of internet and television across the nation. According to the survey, across the nation, around 70% of students, they have a kind of a broadband connection in their homes. So, but if we consider the mobile data penetration, and it's actually more. But with regard to mobile, I mean broadband connection, our survey showed that around 70% of students or households have internet connections at home. We were able to establish a platform for sharing the resources, which we call the Phila portal, which is used by the teachers to share their learning material, I mean the teaching materials, lesson notes, and teaching aids across the nation to the students, and to be shared among other teachers as well. For the continuity of learning, with the help of the service providers, we were able to provide free mobile data to the students and teachers. As mentioned before, televised lessons are being conducted, and it was conducted. Teachers are being trained to they are being trained to various aspects of ICT in education. Many programs or training programs are being conducted, and one of such program is the Google Certified Educator Training, which we have kind of 40% of our teachers have been now trained to Google Certified Educator Training. And with the help of GPE, we were able to kind of provide some laptop for teachers, around 420 laptops. And 5 mini studio is being developed in different regions. This helps us to the production of educational content in a decentralized manner. When for example, Malé city or the capital city is under lockdown, the production of educational content is done in different regions. So there, I mean, mini studios are developed in 5. Is being developed in 5 regions, and there is this information management system. EMIS, we call it the MEMIS, Maldives Education Management System. Information management system. So the student attendance is being monitored through MEMIS, within which different modes of learning are captured. And we have also done an analysis of the Google Meet classes, the number of classes the schools they have conducted, how many hours the students spend online, and I mean, which is disaggregated school-wise and region-wise, I mean, teacher-wise, gender-wise, yeah. So provision of Wi-Fi dongle to the most economically vulnerable families. In addition to the provision of free mobile data, we have also provided some kind of Wi-Fi dongles to the most vulnerable families, which cannot afford to a smartphone or maybe a broadband connection at home. With regard to ICT, I mean, a master plan. As I mentioned, we are developing this plan with the help and support from UNESCO, and as Toan mentioned, we have been doing this for the last 2 years, but we were supposed to finish, I mean, in 2019, but as the COVID pandemic hit, there is some delay. In just a snapshot, we are almost kind of done with the ICT Master Plan 2.0. This is just a snapshot of the content which is covered. Actually, there are 4 main thrust areas in the ICT Master Plan, which is the digital competence and leadership, the digital learning resources, the thrust area 3, infrastructure and connectivity, educational data management and system development. Then of course there is this under introduction, the background and the status of ICT in education and key areas. Yeah. So as mentioned, we are almost done, like 95% of ICT master, and we expect to complete the ICT master plan by the end of this month actually. So we are currently doing the final endorsement, and validations are ongoing. So we hope to complete the ICT master plan by the end of this month. As of now, if we have a look at the proposed, the activities, the projects which is stated in the ICT master plan, actually it costs 43.29 million US dollars for, actually the ICT master plan is for 3 years. There is a huge portion of, huge percentage, actually 88% of the budget goes to the thrust area 3, which is built in the infrastructure and connectivity. Even though Maldives has been one of the country which has high internet penetration, we do need to invest on the school infrastructure, particularly on connectivity and providing required devices, hardware devices and accessories. So a huge portion goes here. But if we break down the cost, the 43 million into 4 years, it's like 10 million US dollars per year. But in terms of like if it is for one per student, I don't think it's a very high cost. It's approximately $150 per student per year. Actually, Maldives budget, the annual budget for 2021 is actually it's the 6.3% of the annual budget. Just a snapshot of the entire budget breakdown. In terms of partnership, actually, most relevant ministries and the government agencies have been actively engaged during the process, which includes Ministry of Communication, Science and Technology, recently merged with the Environment Ministry. The National University, the Technology Department of the President Office, the CTO, Chief Technology Officer. The private sector, mainly tourism related, and NGOs and UNICEF have been actively engaged during the formulation of the ICT master plan. They have all been actively engaged in various stages of envisioning project formulation and perspective discussions on the costing. These discussions have been extremely helpful in obtaining up-to-date national level data and developing various programs and projects. This engagement have also helped in better articulating feasible projects and have guided MOI project team in terms of considering the cost-effective options. There are already indications from private sources. Mati, one of the private institution in the Maldives in the area, and also from they are keen to invest on some of the project that they would be they would like to complement on the national budgetary resources to kind of run the projects. So this multi-sectoral and participatory nature of preparing the master plan has been very helpful in terms of achieving a feasible and an implementable master plan. In terms of resource mobilization, through direct involvement in the planning and validation stage, once the plan is endorsed, the master plan will be disseminated to additional development partners such as World Bank, GP, UNESCO, etc., seeking their support for the activities. Maldives, like the other countries being distributed across the sea, depend quite much on different donor agencies in terms of our, economic vulnerability. In addition to the national budget, we would be disseminating the master plan to seek the funding from different donors. The master plan will be submitted and presented to the Social Council, which is a subcommittee of the cabinet, to the Ministry of Finance, and to the internet service providers in the country. There are 2 internet service providers in the country. It is hoped that this engagement will be productive in securing some funding locally, and also, locally for some of the activities included in the master plan. So by presenting the paper to the cabinet or the social council, the finance ministry, to the service providers, the internet service providers, we hope that we would be able to secure some fund for some of the activities in the master plan. We see the next step would be to, as mentioned before, to share the master plan with the stakeholders and donors, and identify the funding gaps, and to prepare costed mini proposal to reach out for funds, and activate the monitoring team and strengthen the central coordination, and start implementing the ICT master plan. And as for the future plans, we wish to evaluate the Maldivian education system and the schools to an international ICT benchmark or standard. And some future focus, planned activities or project in terms of ICT in education. We have, a lot of attention has been given lately to develop the vocational education, STEM education, TVET, and the inclusion of 21st century competencies. Under this establishment of regional hub schools, which we call Barabaru school, meaning to say it's a school that provides all kinds of programs like STEM education, coding, art, sports science, and robotic and stuff. So new regional hub schools, which will be established in 5 different area or 5 regional hubs across the nation, and establishment of skill labs in school, which the skill labs are focused for the students to be engaged in different sort of skills, starting from grade 1 and up until grade 12. That's it, and thank you very much once again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Moosa. It's great to see all the ICT and education initiatives that you've already done, even though the MP hasn't been completed. And it's right, because we cannot sometimes wait for the master plan, but some of these initiatives will go hand in hand. So next, we will now move into the Q&A. We have some questions here from the audience. Please also send in your questions if you have any, and we'll try to address them in this session. So first to Reetina from Kiribati. I'm not sure if you're still here with us, and if you can hear. A question on how much has already been achieved in terms of implementation and funding. I'm not sure if Reetina has connectivity issues. We will try to cover this question afterwards if she's still here with us. A question from Philip Purnell. What are the efforts of ministries of education to build digital citizenship competencies of students to help ensure that they use digital tools safely and responsibly? This question can be to all, any of the country representatives. Moosa, maybe if you could address that from Maldives.
Could you repeat once again, please?
What are the efforts to build digital citizenship competencies of students to help ensure that they use digital tools safely and responsibly?
All right, very good question. Actually, there are a couple of projects or programs that has already been stipulated in the master plan, and some of the activities are already, some of the program are already in progress. There is one program which we call, it's by Google actually. Be Internet Awesome is a program which is designed for students to inculcate the digital citizenship. So this program, we have already started this program and will be continued for the next 1 to 2 years. And there are other school level programs which has been kind of designed. We'll be able to kind of launch these new programs once we finalize the master plan, costing and everything. These include the school level programs under which the parent awareness, the information to the teachers, the training given to the teachers to be delivered to the students and to the community to inculcate the digital values, the ethics, and the elements of the citizenship. Thank you.
Moosa. A question to our colleagues from Solomon Islands. Are you able to introduce taxation?
We also like to respond to the same question that you asked to the Maldives.
Sure, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. In the Solomon Islands, we have this child protection policy. That's the policy that looking after the welfare of these children. And we, in this child protection policy, cyber securities and cyber risks and threats are also captured in this child protection policy. And we are looking at the usage of internet as well. Then we need to protect them while they are online. So hopefully this child protection policy will help us to address all these cybersecurity risks. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Joe and Peter. Another question to you, Joe and Peter. Are you able to introduce taxation measures to provide an education taxation levy on private telecommunications companies and social media platforms? For example, in other countries, they have introduced a 1 cent charge per SMS text message with funds generated dedicated to supporting ICT in education. Just curious if that has been an approach that has been explored in Solomon Islands.
Thank you, Toan. We do not explore that possibility, but it sounds as a good possibility. But in terms of government system, the Ministry of Education doesn't have a mandate to actually collect tax from whoever that's providing connectivity to the school in terms of the ICT. It is the responsibility of the Ministry of Finance to collect tax from whatever company that is established in Solomon ICT related, or it could be other businesses that they established in the Solomon Islands. But that could be a possibility that we can see as a way forward to support the Ministry of Education in terms of the implementation of the ICT master plan. But at this stage, that is currently what we have legally, and the Ministry of Education is not mandated in terms of the law to actually collect tax. But it's a good thing to learn from the other countries on how they do it. In which it's something that we can explore in terms of the avenue to collect revenue to support the implementation of the ICT master plan in the Solomon Islands. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. In the interest of time, I think we will try to cover one more question. From Richard Gonzalez, I would like to know whether these plans encompass capacity building of teachers and school managers. Do these plans come with expenditure frameworks to ensure implementation and sustainability? This question can be addressed to any of the participants. Peter, Joe, if you want to take that on first, then we can move over to Moosa.
Hey, yes. Whether the plan encompasses capacity building for teachers and school managers. Yes. Yeah, actually, in the context of Maldives, there has been quite a lot of programs focused for the development, focused on the capacity development of teachers. And it's one of the thrust area in the ICT master plan of the education, ICT master plan in the Maldives. The thrust area one is the capacity building for leaders and sector staff. Meaning to say, there are couple of programs for the staff, for the teachers, and also for the school managers. It's one of the thrust area. It's called the ICT competencies and leadership. So a couple of quite a lot of programs have been designed for the teachers and to the school managers. Thank you.
Yes, Toan.
Yes.
Yeah, for the Solomon Islands, we have in our master plan, it's under component 2, the teacher development. Currently, we don't do much on this component. We have, like, there are other programs that are currently going on. We have IPAM. That training, it was designed for public servants or government officials. However, for the teachers, we don't have any programs for them, but it was in our master plan. We will look at it as we move on.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you, John.
Toan, just to add to Peter, in terms of the master plan, we have that capacity building training for the teachers is in the master plan. Another challenge that we face in terms of the resourcing, in terms of finance to actually do all the work that we have in the master plan, to implement them in terms of the funds that are given to us by the government. That is where the constraint is. But this is a very important point that we have to do. We have to ensure that we train the teachers, and it's in our plan. And we in terms of the progress, we have a plan there, and we have some initial discussion surrounding on how are we going to ensure that we implement this to support the teachers at the school level. And it is reflected in our work plan for the year. And probably because we have a lot of about 11,600 teachers we have in the Solomon Islands, so it will be a whole lot of training. And we have to see how are we going to scope the training, whether we're going to train some first and then some later. We have a plan for that to actually build the capacity of our teachers or the knowledge related to the ICT. But so far now, we didn't do much because of the challenge that we have faced in terms of the financing. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Joe, Peter, and Moosa. In the interest of time, we will request to close this Q&A. We will try to cover some of the other questions if we can later on in this session. So this wraps up our second session on country lessons learned. I would like to once again thank the officials from Kiribati, Maldives, and Solomon Islands for sharing their valuable insights. Our next session is one that you won't want to miss, where we will be covering the main topic of innovative financing, including preliminary findings from our research and going more in depth onto the 3 sub-themes. But before that, we'll now take a short 5-minute break before continuing. Stay with us and we'll see you back here in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Master planning, component 3 and 4 now. Very important component. You don't do it. Not really the teachers, but we have a private person. So this component is a framework for teachers and there's something that we see that sometimes you know,
Thank you for staying with us. We'll be back in about 1 minute. Thank you. Welcome back. I hope you're ready for session 3 on innovative financing. In preparation for this conference, UNESCO undertook a research to develop a thematic brief and to more deeply understand the various aspects of innovative financing. To start us off, this next presentation will share the preliminary findings that was discovered through the desk research and focus group discussions with key stakeholders and influencers in the region. Matthew Griffin was the consultant who undertook the development of this thematic brief. He's an Australian-based independent consultant and researcher specializing in cybersecurity, education, and ICT for development. Matthew's career has taken him around the world, completing in-country fieldwork, academic and policy research, program management, and strategic engagements across Asia, Africa, Europe, Latin America, and the Pacific. Matthew has held previous work positions at organizations such as the Oceania Cybersecurity Center, University of Oxford, University of Kent, and the University of Newcastle. He holds a Master of Diplomacy in Trade and Graduate Certificate in Business from Monash University, and a combined Bachelor of Business and Commerce from the University of Newcastle. Over to you, Matthew.
Thank you, Toan. Hopefully that's all looking good.
Yes, it is.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you for that very kind introduction. It's a real pleasure to be here with you all today. As you just heard, my name is Matthew Griffin. I've been working with UNESCO, the UNESCO Bangkok team, to explore these opportunities that innovative financing can provide and hopefully advance the area of ICT and education in the Pacific. And we've already heard some really valuable insights and learnings related to this topic today. And before we jump into some practical examples and lessons from our next set of speakers, I'd like to first share with you some of the preliminary findings of the research so far, as Toan mentioned, as part of the development of this thematic brief. So the purpose of the thematic brief is to provide policymakers and education and financing stakeholders with an improved understanding of the activities and best practices for financing in ICT and education. The thematic brief will contribute to this by providing a source of knowledge and sharing practical lessons on the topic. And we hope it will help also to encourage partnerships that can explore and drive innovative financing approaches in the region. In order to collect the information to inform the thematic brief, we've completed a range of different data collection activities. So to start off with, we did some desk-based research, looking at existing reports and activities and information that had already been collected in the region. And this helped to inform and was followed by focus group discussions and one-on-one interviews. As Toan mentioned earlier, as part of this data collection, we have had the pleasure to meet with a range of representatives. This included from Pacific ministries, regional organisations, funders, intergovernmental organisations, education institutions, and capacity development organisations. And to round it off, we're also going to be capturing the insights from today. I've been taking lots of notes. There's been lots of great discussion already, and we'll use the information from the conference today to help kind of finalise and further our perspectives for the thematic brief. So in terms of the context of this thematic brief, so Toan has already provided some introduction on the topic, and it makes us think about why we're looking at innovative financing and ICT and education in the Pacific. And I'm sure many of you have experienced yourselves, either coming from or having visited the Pacific. The Pacific's been going through a period of technological change. So internet connectivity has been increasing, and there's this broader digital technological transformation that's underway. Although it's important to note that this change has been occurring at different rates, both across and within Pacific communities. And this digital divide is something that I've personally witnessed during my visit to the Pacific over the past few years. So in order for the Pacific to realise the educational benefits of such technological advancement, there's a need for sustainable funding approaches and solutions that can overcome funding gaps that exist between the policy goals and the resource realities of the Pacific Island countries. So one way to look at this issue is just from the numbers. So the funding gap is not just an issue for education. So there's an estimated additional $2.5 trillion US, and that's trillion, not billion, trillion US dollars in funding that is needed annually to ensure the achievement of the United nation's sustainable development goals over the next decade. Now, with global capital markets estimated at over $200 trillion, there's an opportunity here to address the funding of global development challenges by working together to unlock private capital and for it to be used in a way that can drive impact projects. And this can really help drive initiatives on a global scale. And we think this is something that could be achieved through innovative financing approaches. So how does innovative financing fit into this broader project? Well, innovative financing can complement existing traditional sources of funding, and together they can help nations to achieve their policy objectives. The additional financing can help contribute to larger scale and more sustainable ICT and education interventions. And this can help to accelerate and scale up all the existing hard work and innovative ideas that are being trialled in the region. And this can help us all together to work to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal 4, which we've heard a lot about today, on ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education and promoting lifelong learning opportunities for all. Now, for the purpose of the Thematic Brief, we're taking a broad approach to defining innovative financing. So with this in mind, we're considering innovative financing as all non-traditional financing that includes elements such as being linked to global public goods, such as education, involving multilateral management and partnerships with private entities, including a combination of domestic and international financing. It might involve innovation in the delivery and the mobilization of resources. The approaches, the approaches that specifically link funding to impact results, the generation of a substantial and sustainable flow of funds rather than just one-off, and approaches that can help to enhance the efficiency and effectiveness of financial flows. So in order to better understand the requirements and environments in which innovative financing approaches for ICT and education in the Pacific could occur, we first want to think about and identify the key stakeholders that might be interested and affected by such activity. So as part of our research and discussions, we identified a range of internal and external stakeholder groups. Each of these groups all play important roles in the funding and the implementation and the benefits of ICT and education interventions. So some examples, so these include internal stakeholders that we're looking at that are based within Pacific nations. And these include stakeholder groups such as teachers, schools and universities that are within the education sector. They include stakeholders such as the internet service providers and infrastructure owners that are part of the broader ICT sector. And they also include, of course, students, parents and different organisations, faith-based organisations that all form together as part of the general community. And then when you look at the external stakeholders, that are those who are working with the Pacific communities, the different groups included funders, such as key donor nations, international financing institutions, as well as private organisations and foundations. They include regional organisations, such as the Pacific Community or the Pacific Internet Society, PICASOC. And they also include all the different actors and players that form part of this overall capacity building community that are working together to advance and achieve the SDGs. So further to identifying who these key stakeholders are with an interest in this topic, we've also discovered some key thematic areas when it comes to innovative financing approaches to ICT and education in the Pacific. You have to wait a little bit longer for all the full details and analysis in our final thematic brief, but I'm happy to share with you now some of our preliminary findings. So first and foremost, there's a need to acknowledge the Blue Pacific narrative and ensure that the Pacific community plays a leadership role with any sort of innovations and rollout of ICT education financing. Secondly, innovative financing instruments provide an opportunity for the Pacific to unlock additional capital by de-risking investments from the private sector, and that can be used to fund social impact investments in projects that include technology and education. There's also an opportunity to optimise the coordination at a regional level. So this could help to minimise any duplication of effort that might be occurring, encourage stakeholders that are involved with these projects to find more sustainable models that can move beyond these pilot studies and focus on supporting longer term impacts. And lastly, acknowledging and understanding how all these new emerging technologies, such as blockchain and other new technologies, can support financial innovation and transparency as part of these projects. As with any big project, there are, of course, barriers and challenges that need to be addressed. So in order to take advantage of these opportunities, we have to consider these challenges that might restrict the success of innovative financing and of ICT and education in the Pacific. So from the research, we identified a range of different barriers and challenges. Some of these included the need to build awareness for innovative financing approaches amongst policymakers and key education and ICT stakeholders, recognising the capacity limitations and challenges, particularly with Pacific Island nations, where we have representatives from ministries that are already stretched across a number of different portfolios. The broader challenge of retaining ICT workers and skilled workers in the region. Access to timely and accurate information that can allow governments to and investors to inform decision-making. Dealing with the cybersecurity risks of these new technologies, which we heard a little bit about earlier, and how some countries are working to address that. And of course, one of the big ones is providing that quality, reliable, and affordable access to the internet for all. So as part of the Thematic Brief, we will build on these findings and challenges. And we'll also include case studies to share some of the real-world examples and lessons learned. Our upcoming speakers will be sharing with you today some of their own experiences, and we've organised this across 3 innovative financing sub-themes. Sub-theme 1 will focus on the different financing instruments for development that can unlock access to capital markets and help bridge the gap between resource supply and demand. Sub-theme 2 will focus on the different partnership models that can drive innovative financing approaches and support the sharing of expertise. And can support the sharing of expertise, capacity, and capabilities to deliver ICT education interventions. And lastly, sub-theme 3 will focus on resource mobilisation and the approaches to identifying and bring together the wide range of financial, technical, and human resources required to effectively and efficiently deliver ICT and education interventions. So just before I finish up and we move on to these sub-theme sessions, I wanted to share with you our next steps from here. So after today's event, we will see how we can incorporate the presentations and discussions from the conference into our draft Thematic Brief. This will help us to develop our case studies and also to prepare a set of recommendations to guide the way forward and help Pacific governments to strengthen finance planning and ICT in education in the future. So please get in touch if you have any further information that you think we should consider as part of this work. And we very much look forward to sharing the final document with you in the coming months. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Matthew, for sharing your presentation. It's really set the stage and context for the next 3 sub-theme sessions, as we'll dive deep into the different projects, organizations, and perspectives in the areas of innovative financing. This first sub-theme will be on financing instruments for development, defined as innovative financial products for attracting, existing, and/or unlocking new public and private sector capital. These instruments help to bridge the gap for resourcing needs for ICT and education and for maintaining it. We have the pleasure of hearing from 2 highly experienced professionals and their perspectives from 2 relatively different areas. First, we welcome Jonathan Wong, Chief of the Trade and Investment Division at the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, based in Bangkok. Jonathan brings a wealth of experience in the innovation, financing, and technology space. He has previously worked as the head of innovation at the UK Department of International Development, helped to establish high-profile initiatives such as the Global Innovation Fund, and advised governments on related policies across Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. Before that, Jonathan was a founding partner of a technology and innovation venture capital fund and supported the establishment of the UK NHS Institute for Innovation and Improvement. He's also served as APAC's e-commerce business counsel, the UN CDF board for ASEAN, and was awarded a Rockefeller Foundation Policy Fellowship and is a World Economic Schwab Fellow. Please join me in welcoming Jonathan. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Toan, and welcome to you all, and hello to you all as well. Thank you for inviting me to speak at this event. If you let me share my screen, just bear with me. Can you see the slides, Toan?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay, let's move on. So thank you for that kind introduction as well. As I mentioned, I'm the Chief of Technology Innovation at the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, based in Bangkok. And today I'll have my confession first. I am no education expert, so be gentle with me within the Q&A. But I have worked extensively on innovative financing, both from developing mechanisms as well as supporting government policy on this agenda as well. And today, really, I wanted, again, given my lack of expertise around education, just build on Matthew's presentation and give some broader context, and maybe give some examples of innovative financing mechanisms we have developed within UNESCAP, work we've done with governments on policy, and then really hone down on maybe some recommendations around whether some of these policies and mechanisms work or not within the context of education, and indeed within the Pacific context as well. So that's kind of the reframing of what I'll talk about today. So let me move on. So I won't dwell on this point because Matthew mentioned it. I think the whole need for innovative financing has been driven by this $2.5 trillion estimated funding gap for the SDGs. And this is why it's really kind of garnering much attention within the development space, because traditional financing mechanisms are obviously not going to be enough to meet this gap. Now, how we think about innovative financing in terms of innovative financing mechanisms, let me give you a few examples just in the context of work we're doing to support women entrepreneurs within UNESCAP. And how I think about innovative financing in layman's or laywoman's terms, if you like, is it's about repurposing traditional financing mechanisms for development objectives, be it women's economic empowerment or indeed providing education for all. And maybe here are just some examples of how we've gone about repurposing these mechanisms. So to give one example, with an organization called IX based in Singapore, we supported the development of the Women's Livelihood Bond. Now this is a bond that specifically mobilizes capital to fund a portfolio of loans to women. And again, usually you have all sorts of bonds, be it property bonds, whatever it may be. But again, this is what I mean by the repurposing. We wanted to move it away just from the profit-making objective, but to include a women's economic empowerment objective. Likewise, I think innovative financing can be best described as well through impact investing. So the shift in thinking, or the innovation, if you like, is this move away from investing, where I came from in my previous life, where I invested to make money, essentially, is what I did. Impact investing is investing to obviously generate a financial return, but also generate some social and environmental impacts, be it affecting climate change, be it providing education for all, healthcare, etc. And again, we worked with a firm in Southeast Asia and Bangladesh to develop an impact investing fund, again, in the context of this project, which made investment decisions not only on whether it would be sustainable financially, turn a profit, have an exit, all those sorts of things that investors think about, but also really rigorously monitoring and evaluating and measuring the impacts on women. So that was kind of the shift. Another thing we worked on was a guarantee fund. Now what we found was many investors were quite hesitant in investing in women-led enterprises for a number of reasons, which I won't go into at this moment in time. But it's fair to say that women face more difficulties than men in gaining access to finance to grow and start their businesses. And with this in mind, we set up a guarantee fund with a company called Good Return, which actually does operate in the Pacific as well, which provides kind of a guarantee and, if you like, an assurance that maybe some of the investment that investors make in women-led enterprises will be guaranteed and paid back if the enterprise fails, to incentivize them to invest in this space. And again, this again is a model that may be used in education, whereby what's evident from my experiences in investing in education projects, predominantly in Africa, was that some of the financial returns may not have been as great as maybe investing in a property company, as a very crude example. And indeed, some of the countries that I invested in a previous life were some of the toughest, poorest countries in the world. And for investors to go into those markets, and I'm sure the Pacific will be the same in many respects, Having these sorts of guarantee funds to kind of incentivize investors to go into new markets and new sectors like education or health provided an incentive to do that. We also think about innovation, innovative financing in UNESCAP as ideas at the intersection of finance and technology. And let me give you a few examples. I think one example in Samoa, we recently made an investment in Samoa in an organization called SkyEye, and SkyEye are developing Samoa's first ever e-payments gateway, which could be incredibly catalytic for the country in many, many different ways. Another idea at the intersection of technology and finance is an organization called iFarmer, which we invested in. Now, what iFarmer is, it's essentially a crowdfunding platform where urban investors in Dhaka, in the capital of Bangladesh, can invest in rural farmers completely online, all of this without even meeting the farmer sometimes. And the profits are shared between the two. So I thought that's quite a neat model. More loosely linked to kind of education or maybe skills development, we also invested in a company called She Investments in Cambodia, which I call a very cool app on a very uncool topic. Now, a big problem for women entrepreneurs in Cambodia is that they don't have the financial records to get access to finance from banks, as an example. So what this app does is it actually provides a very simple interface in Khmer, the national language, for women to keep their financial records, and actually provides digital literacy skills as well, and financial literacy skills, which are incredibly important for women to access finance. So a slight education angle there, but again, just some examples of how we think about innovations at the intersection of finance and technology. Now, in terms of government policy, and I'll go into this in my recommendations as well, governments have a really important role to play in all of this as well. And the framing we use for government intervention is around three areas: one, market facilitator; two, market regulator; three, market participant. And to give examples, as a market facilitator in Malaysia, we developed something with the Malaysian government called the Social Impact Exchange. Now, this mirrors what a stock exchange looks like. Essentially links impact investors to social purpose organizations delivering healthcare, education, all these services, and acts as that kind of, if you like, facilitation mechanism to link these organizations with potential investors. Again, governments can play a market regulation role as well. And in Thailand, here where I'm based, we worked on the role.
Mark, Jonathan?
Sorry?
1 minute, Mark.
Okay, you know what? I'll skip on. So a couple of quick key questions. Would these innovative financing mechanisms and policy measures work in the education sector, and would they be relevant to Pacific? I've got 6 key recommendations. The first one, and I say this as someone who's worked on technology and innovative financing for a long time and is a big advocate of this. Think of the problem first and the solution second. And I always say this: technology and innovative financing may not be the answer, and be very mindful of that all the time. It may just be a better use of public funding for education. It may just be better training for teachers or whatever that may be. Again, I'm no expert in education, but don't think of this. Don't think of the solution first. Is the key message there. I think second, use the relevant innovative financing mechanism. From my experiences, if you look at impact investing as an innovative financing mechanism, which looks to generate financial return alongside social impact, it's quite hard to get financial returns from education in many ways, because many of these are public finance. So impact investing may not be the right model, but something like results-based financing or outcomes-based financing, which I think the next speaker is going to go into more detail, may be the more useful mechanism in that respect. I think 3 and 4 I'll take together: engage the private sector and meet a real educational need. I mentioned She Investments earlier. We engaged the private sector technology company, and it met a real need within the women entrepreneurship community to build their financial and digital skills to unlock access to finance for women entrepreneurs. And they indeed paid for that service. So in that model, there was a financial model to keep the innovation sustainable alongside the social impact. 5th, implement incentivizing policies. I think in the chat, someone mentioned in the Philippines that the government is giving private investors and corporations tax incentives for investing in basic education. That's incredibly catalytic. Equally in Singapore, governments provide tax incentives to the largest companies in the country to provide lifelong training to their staff. And this is with the point in mind that Singapore is one of the most technologically advanced countries in the world. And they're worried about AI taking over jobs, etc. So they're putting tax incentives in place to reskill workers on that. And last but not least, consider the investment culture. It was an interesting insight, and Toan, I promise I'll stop after this. It was an interesting insight for us when we went into the Pacific. We wanted to set up an impact investment fund, and this fund would essentially take equity stakes in companies. And what we found in Samoa and Fiji was that entrepreneurs didn't want to give away equity. They'd much rather take a loan. And that really made us think about, actually, maybe impact investing isn't the right mechanism. We went for a guarantee fund. So I think that's a really important point. I will stop there, and thank you very much, and apologies for going over time, Toan.
Thank you for those great examples of innovative financing. And the key question that you asked is correct. How do we make these financing mechanisms work in the education sector and for the Pacific context? As we saw, there exists a great amount of capital out there, which has yet to be unlocked. Our next speaker is closely aware of this fact. Komal Sahu is the Chief of Sustainable Finance at the Asian Venture Philanthropy Network, where she engages with family offices, high net worth individuals, private wealth holders, corporations, and financial institutions across Asia with the goal of investing for impact and sustainability. Over the last decade, Komal has provided support to a number of social enterprises and charities across Asia. She's also an angel investor and limited partner in early and late stage funds. Many of her investments have focused on generating societal good. Komal has served as a mentor at a number of incubators and accelerators and has worked with startups including at A-Star, a Singapore government-led accelerator for science and technology companies that are improving lives through innovation and discoveries. She's also a fellow of the Association of Certified Accountants, a chartered tax advisor, and a non-exec director. Over to you, Komal.
Hi, thank you, Toan. Thank you, UNESCO, for inviting me. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
I'm just going to make sure. And it's in the slideshow mode?
Not right now.
Okay, just give me a second.
I think you need to enable editing, perhaps.
Enable editing.
On that yellow bar on the right.
Give me a second.
That button that says enable editing is in the yellow bar.
Ah, okay, yeah, see it.
And then slideshow.
Sorry, just give me a second, just trying to get.
If you click slideshow.
I'm trying to find where the slideshow is. I think the bar is hiding it. Just give me a second.
Just maybe mouse a little bit upwards. I believe if you click F5 on the mouse on the keyboard, it should work as well.
It isn't. Just give me a second. Sorry about that.
Move your mouse just a little bit upwards. There's the word slideshow. A little bit further up. That's the left side.
I'm sorry. Is it okay if I go ahead in
Sure,
this mode?
Yes, I think it should be okay.
Thank you for inviting me. Sorry about that. AVPN is a network of funders and resource providers, and we're based in 13 different markets in Asia. Many of the entities presented in my slideshow are actually long-standing members, and we help them achieve their impact and philanthropy goals. And thank you to Jonathan and Matthew for setting the stage for this topic on innovative financing for education. This topic is also quite timely because at AVPN, we're in the process of launching our Center for Social Finance, and this is with the support of our member UBS Optimus Foundation. UBS Optimus is actually a foundation that has supported a number of products for education in Asia. And today I'm going to be speaking about how innovative financing can address the gaps in education and how blended finance can help increase the use of ICT in education and generate positive learning outcomes in the Pacific region. What I would say is, like Jonathan, I'm not an education expert, so I'm bringing sort of examples of some of our members, and there's clearly many of them that are focused in the education space and specifically for SDG 4 to ensure that quality education is delivered for one and all. So what we're talking about are called effectively one of the leading mechanisms is actually a pay for success model. It's a financing mechanism, and the typical structure involves an intermediary who often ends up being a not-for-profit entity, and they bring all the stakeholders together. That's the government, the investors, the service providers, and as well as the evaluators. And in this case, the investors could be private funders or foundations. And how the intermediary begins the process is they start off with a feasibility study. They determine whether this product is actually going to work, and then they decide that if the feasibility study proves that this is actually effective, then they start a legal contract with all of the different entities to agree who's going to pay for what are the costs involved, who's going to service the actual facilitation of the service, who's going to be involved with evaluating, and therefore a legal contract is formed between the various parties. And pay for success models are particularly useful because they help defray some of the risks between the public as well as the private funders. They also result in innovation and efficiency, and it's a results-based financing mechanism that actually uses evidence to make sure that the payments are targeted to the right service providers. So the different types of pay for success models have 3 different variations, and I'm discussing the 3 most sort of commonly used ones. The first one is something called a social impact bond. This is where the private investor pays upfront, but then the government steps in and pays for the outcomes. What this does allow is for a public-private partnership. It helps close the gap when it comes to social service provision, and it's an evidence-based intervention. What it does do is it reduces the costs by and also shifts the focus from inputs and outputs to outcomes. So bearing in mind, outcomes are longer term, and it helps to solve issues where the governments often may not be able to completely step in and cover all the funding up front. The government pays once it's seen the evidence of the outcomes. So this shifts that risk away from the government. Now, there's another form of social impact bond is the development, a further sort of evolution is the development impact bond. Here, it's the third-party donor versus the government that pays for the outcomes. So the private investor pays up front, and the third-party donor pays for the outcomes. The risk is completely borne by the private and the philanthropic sector and not by the government. It's therefore a little bit more flexible because it allows for innovation and creativity. You're not restricted by government mandates, and it allows for better outcomes for beneficiaries as well as the benefit partners. I would say that In Asia, and some of the models I'll talk about, we've seen more in terms of development, and especially the larger numbers, we've seen more in terms of development impact bonds than we've seen with respect to social impact bonds, which have primarily been implemented in the West. A newer, more recent form of a pay for success model is the social impact guarantee. This is where the government pays up front. The private investor only repays if the outcomes are not met. So again, the risk is taken away from the government, because what happens is the private investor actually guarantees in case the outcome is not met. So especially if the government is kind of hesitant to step into this role, what happens is, because they have a guarantee in place, if the outcome's not met, this kind of facilitates, I guess, a greater commitment to trying to achieve the goal that the social impact guarantee is trying to achieve. This also means that the risk of double capitalization that often exists with social impact bonds, because social impact bonds are implemented over a period of time, and governments are often used to, in terms of budgets, getting their annual budgets, and if these are not defrayed, then they're somewhat concerned, will they be in a position to meet the outcomes which are going to be measured perhaps in 3 years' time. Here, what's happening is the government, with respect to the social impact guarantee, the government's paying from day one, but it has clearly using its earmarked funds for that purpose to advance the project. So what has been the success of these pay for success models? So far, as of May of this year, 213 such impact bonds have been been implemented. And I would say, and this is across 35 countries, 49 of these impact bonds have been completed. 33 have led to payment. And I would say, of which 14 of the 49 are still to be paid. They're being subject to an evaluation, and 2 have not led to repayment. There's a lot of learning from the ones that have not led to repayment as well, because failures allow us to assess why these models don't work. And the 2 that I do know globally that have not led to repayment, one was on looking at adolescent behavior of youth that has been incarcerated. The other one was dealing with women's empowerment in Austria for women who have been affected by violence. It's difficult at this stage to say exactly why they didn't succeed, but they could have been a wrong type of metric that was selected, or lack of understanding of the underlying issue. But nonetheless, I would say it's important to learn from the failures in order to ensure that these models work. So talking about pay for success models in education, we have seen 3 such development impact bonds having been put together in India. They have clearly—
1 minute mark, Komal?
Sorry, go ahead.
We're at the 1 minute mark.
Okay, I will quickly speed it up. The Educate Girls was the first of its kind. We had, this was implemented in 2015. It was 270,000 that was paid by UBS Optimus Foundation, and another funder, Children's Investment Foundation, repaid the outcome, and in fact it was perceived to be a success. So it actually dealt with lots of schoolgirls who were not attending school, and the government didn't have enough funding to be able to support this in the state of Rajasthan, and 7,000 children benefited, and clearly the outcomes that were intended were achieved. But what it also did was, it was a test case, a pilot case for a larger such bond to be launched with the support of the UBS Optimus Foundation. This was the Quality Education India Development Impact Bond. Here, again, UBS Optimus stepped in. Grey Matters India was the evaluator, and it was an outcome fund of $11 million that was created, and this is still in the process of being, I guess it's a couple of years from being closed. Obviously, the pandemic has affected it, but the outcomes are still being achieved. And here, the outcome pair is the Michael and Susan Deno Foundation. And then we have something that was implemented in July of 2020, which is clearly, during the COVID environment, it was in 2014, the government of India allowed 2% of and mandated 2% of government, all profits for all corporates needs to go towards CSR budgets. So this was a large corpus of CSR funding that the government had mandated used towards this. And again, 3,330 schools, 115,000 students impacted. And because of COVID, the funders came and stepped in and allowed the students to study from home and gave them smartphones and tablets to be able to do that. We are clearly seeing an evolution in this space, and we've seen more in Singapore in terms of upskilling, and we've even seen a social impact guarantee being implemented. Now, when it comes to looking at challenges of pay for success models, obviously transaction costs can be high, as much as 7 to 10%. But if it's used as a pilot, then clearly it's an opportunity to then defray those costs, as we saw in the case of UBS Optimus. Also, the monitoring mechanisms can be expensive. And here again, ICT has a major role to play. Data is clearly relevant for us to be able to evaluate if the outcomes are being met. The selection of metrics is also important, and make sure that they're few number, outcomes focused, measurable, and informed by evidence. And again, this is realistic given the time horizon. We also need, again, back to that data, it's important for the government to be able to feel that this is transparent and trustworthy. How can innovative finance further ICT in education? It can help bridge the digital divide for children. They need to be ready for the 21st century. It can improve learning outcomes so that they get superior learning outcomes through personalized instruction. It engages the students, it manages the classroom. It also supports the teachers in making sure that they are ready to implement and have data to make sure that the outcomes being achieved for the children are being noted and being achieved. It also allows for a larger population to benefit from greater access to education. So the impact bonds are just one of the combinations. We already heard Jonathan talk about impact investing, but for education at the early stages, at an area like the Pacific Islands, that's where I think this innovative financing could have a greater role to play. Just finally, how can we foster this blended finance ecosystem in the Pacific Islands? We could think about doing a knowledge hub where all the various stakeholders, including governments, have an opportunity to create an overall efficiency by sharing best practices with each other. We can foster public-private partnerships, and here we can leverage off some of the telecommunications companies, some of the internet companies, and I know many of them are speaking, to make sure that there's infrastructure created for EdTech. And then there needs to be an enabling legal and regulatory environment. We saw in the case of India, the government mandated 2% for CSR, and that ended up therefore being used for developing a bond, and you can see how this further evolves. But also there clearly needs to be structures in place such that the governments can fund where necessary, have longer term time horizons, and meet outcome funders in 3 years' time, if that's what it means for them to be able to support a particular project. I appreciate, thank you for the extra time, Toan. If there are any questions, I'm there at the end and happy to take those on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Komal. The pay for success model is indeed a very interesting and promising model, and it would be great to see how impact investors and governments can work together in the blended finance ecosystem to support ICT in education. Just a reminder to our participants as well, you can feel free to reach out to the speakers through the chats here, as well as you can reach out to them through the materials on our website, and reach out to UNESCO, and we can also connect you, as this conference is also setting to build partnerships in the region. We next move on to the next sub-theme on innovative partnerships between public and private partners, engaging international and local development organizations, private and community, and between governments and ministries. Our next speaker, Rumanusina Mawa, is a project coordinator for ICT in education at the UNESCO Office for the Pacific States. She will share about her work coordinating the Waka Moana Learning Management Platform. With over 15 years of professional work experience in the health and ICT sector in Samoa, Ririmae is well-versed in how international development organizations and regional partners can work together. She was previously the Assistant CEO in the Health Information Systems and ICT at the Ministry of Health in Samoa and has also worked extensively in the region. She holds a BA from the Victoria University of Wellington and an MA from the University of New South Wales. Please join me in welcoming Ririmae. Over to you.
Thank you, Toan. Let me just first share my screen. Oh, not my email. Hold on.
We can also share it from our side if you'd like.
Okay, let's do that. So we can. Okay.
Should I just cancel the share screen?
Okay, so I've stopped sharing, Toan. Okay, let me try again.
Ririmae, maybe perhaps while we're waiting, we can move on to the next speaker first and then come back to you.
I think I have my screen on. Can you just check?
No, the share screen is not. Okay. Try again. Perhaps in the interest of time, we can move on to the next speaker and then we'll come back to you, Ririmae.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So then we'll move on to from development and the social sector to the private sector. Our next speaker, Amelie Wang, Director of International Business Cooperation at the Weidong Cloud Education Group, will provide a perspective of what private sector donors look for when supporting national and ICT and education projects. Amelie has many years of experience in ICT and education and cooperation with the development sector, having conducted several international projects as part of Weidong. She is personally committed to contributing a balanced global education development for countries and regions in the world. Over to you, Amelie.
Okay, thank you, Toan. Thanks again for the invitation, and it's a great pleasure for us to share our best practice and also our solutions with partners. So can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I will firstly begin with a brief introduction of our group. And we are Weidong Cloud Education Group and established in 2012. And we are aiming to build a global ecosystem of digital transformation in education. And our headquarters is in China, Qingdao, China. And nowadays, our global presence is in 116 cities and regions in domestic China, and also in 25 countries in the globe. For example, we have our subsidiaries in France, in Germany, Switzerland, and also many project implementations in Uzbekistan, Philippines, and also several countries in Africa. So we provide the total solution of digital transformation in education for public sectors, enterprises, and educational institutions. And also we are a strategic partner of UNESCO, the SAO, and also CMU. So the partnership with UNESCO began from 2014. And we have signed a strategic partnership with UNESCO headquarters. And until 2019, we have successfully supported the holding of 5 sessions of International ICT Education Conference. And we provide also the ICT in education solutions for UNESCO member countries. So in 2018, we have renewed the strategic cooperation with UNESCO, and will continuously support other projects and the cooperation with UNESCO. So since the outbreak of the pandemic, Weidong Cloud Education has joined the Global Education Coalition launched by UNESCO as the first 6 companies with Google, Zoom, Coursera. And we have also provided freely our LMS platform, some ICT capacity building content for our partner countries, for example, Pakistan, Djibouti, Egypt, and so on. And the learning management system has become a very important tool for schools and teachers, students to realize the distance learning and teaching. So in terms of the digital transformation in education solutions that we provide, it includes different components, and we can provide the solutions from the bottom to up, which include, first of all, the ICT infrastructure construction. For example, including the networking construction, the data center construction, and also the smart classroom, which means also the combination, the integration environment of the digital devices. For example, the PC, digital touch screen, and the smart classroom interactive software. So the WellMath platform is the core of our solutions, which will also motivate the innovation in educational digital transformation, and will also elaborate the different parts of our solutions for the digital transformation for partners. So the third part of our solution is the consultant training and operation. So we have over 3,005 out-of-box courses with different languages in English and French. It can provide for teachers, or managers or administrators in the capacity building field. And we also provide the customization services for the training for educational institutions and also for enterprises. So here you can see a layout of our smart classroom. So there are different tiers. First of all, with the construction of the network, plus digital training tools. For example, the wireless visualizer, the touch screen, the PC terminals for students. And also we provide a recording and a live streaming system which can which serves for the teachers to record its class and to restore it as resources. And then it can upload to the WellMath platform learning management system for reuse and for sharing with different campus or different member states. So as for the WellMath system, it supports different language, for example, in English, French, Russian, and it can also support the daily teaching and the learning activities for students and teachers. It also supports the calendar function features, the assignments, quizzes, discussion features, which will accompany with teachers for all daily teaching and learning activities.
1 minute mark, Amelie.
Okay, so I'll go faster. So here's some of our subsidiaries in Europe, and we have Demos Group, which is the largest international professional training group, and it has already 15 years old, and we have also provided solutions and customizations consultant service for over 300 Fortune 500 companies. And we also 8,000 trainer experts and teachers. And our services has been ranked as top 10 global online learning platform, top 10 global training outsourcing services, and so on. So here I would like to share two case study of our international projects with different financing approach. First one is the project of digitalization of the development of handicraft industry of every cost. So this is also one of the successful typical example of the innovation financing approach for projects in the perspective of vocational education. So the project is work with the Ministry of Handicraft Industry of every cost, and it will serve 6 million handicraftsmen for them to empower them with formal trainings and establish also a formal training and learning platform to improve their social position and also to establish a formal certification system. So the project was initiated by the Ministry of Handicraft, Handicraft Ministry. So with the most important national strategy, and it composed with 4 main parts: the construction of 13 handicraft training center, and the construction of ICT infrastructure include the data center, campus network, video surveillance, and also the video conference, and also the platform which serves for the learning and the training for the handicraftsmen, and also the e-commerce portal that we will help the industry to maximize the value of the handicrafts products that they have made. So the financing approach of this project is the international business loans or commercial bank buyer credits, and I have put process of this financing approach. So it is that the government as a borrower and to borrow the money from foreign lending banks in the international financing market. And the lending banks could be one or several. So for our project, the lending bank is from French government. And we have, first of all, the local government should raise the requirements, and then they should find a partner to sign a contract of how to implement the company. And then the two sides will work together to send financing requirements to the commercial bank. They will do several evaluations to make the approve of this project. And finally, the local government will sign the financial agreement with the bank to finally get the validation of the project. So the stakeholders of this financial approach will involve the local government. For example, for our project is Ministry of Handicrafts and the International Bank, and also the project owner. So the second.
Thank you, Amelie. If you could just wrap up in 30 seconds.
Yeah, okay, no problem. Yeah, the second case is the joint project cooperated with UNESCO ICT, that we were the sponsor. We were the sponsor of this project, that we worked with UNESCO ICT and provide the smart classroom solutions for the 6 Asian and African countries, and especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, the smart classroom in Egypt has served 17,000 students during the pandemic. So as we have not yet opened the partnership with Pacific Island, so we are open for more collaborations. And for the indicators for our collaborations evaluation about the projects, we are looking for these 3 points. First of all, we are hoping that the project should be supported by a national policy. For example, the government has supported the digital transformation in whether higher education or vocational education. And then we can find the funding support with local educational institutions or governments to do the implementation of the project. So we think that the digital transformation in education will not stop just with implementation of a smart classroom or just the using of online education platform. So we are also looking for a sustainable plan in digital transformation in education with local partners. So we can provide the project requirements research and analysis service, and to design the total solution and to find the funding solution with the partners, and then to complete the project delivery and operation. So if you have more questions, you can contact me. Thanks. Thank you again.
Thank you, Amelie. It's certainly impressive to see an organization strongly committed to the development of ICT and education in the world, and important to understand the different aspects that you look for when building sustainable partnerships. We'll now move back to Reetina. Reetina, we will share the screen from our side.
I've managed to share my screen.
Okay, great. So we'll let you do that. If you just want to go into presenter mode.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Okay, thank you, Toan. Warm greetings and talofa from the UNESCO for Pacific States here in Samoa. Given time, I will be sharing on the Waka Moana Learning Management Platform, which is a strategy and a measure to respond to COVID-19 pandemic and beyond, whereby small island developing states are in partnership with the Global Partnership for Education, otherwise known as GPE, and they are mainly World Bank, UNICEF, and UNESCO. So this presentation aims to inform, create awareness, and promote to the participants of this webinar the partnership models that are being adopted in the context of the Pacific, as well as the small island developing states, in order to improve, scale up efficacy and developments of ICT in education. And secondly, is to share more about this wonderful intervention known as the Waka Moana Learning Management Platform and financing models involved in backing it. So the Waka Moana LMP demonstrates various models of innovative financing and partnerships. We have one at the global level. We have 3 partners. And while each partner leads on a specific areas of focus given their speciality, they have one specific goal, and that is to ensure continued and accelerated learning for children and youth. As we look more into this partnership, secondly, we need UNESCO to ensure the workability of this global commitment, and therefore it needed to further enter into regional partnerships in the form of public-private partnerships. And with these national governments through its ministries of education, as well as tertiary institution known in the Pacific as the University of the South Pacific. Now, we all know that the Pacific region's geographical isolation and spread of island states across the vast ocean, as presented in the case of Kiribati, it poses a lot of challenges. And therefore, we needed to look at how we can create partnerships at the country or the national level. And this requires the Pacific to be able to ensure that we are sharing financial resources, human resources, as well as technical resources between government and non-governments, including NGOs and commitment and communities. What is key in the in this partnership is coordination overall. And in order to successfully implement this intervention or this project, coordination is paramount. So why partnership by the international agencies? The GPE targeted countries in the Pacific with acute education challenges. For the Pacific nations with limited access to healthcare, plagued by tropical cyclones, COVID presented further significant challenges. So it was therefore imperative that the region develops resilient education systems, focusing on reaching vulnerable populations, supporting those who are digitally isolated with distance learning platforms to make learning more effective. Diversification and contextualization of education resources, as well as development of capacities for teachers and other education personnel on a sub-regional scale is vital for the Pacific, so that we could avoid duplication of investments in building local ones and to serve only hundreds of teachers and students locally. This is in the country, but in a way that we would be ensuring regional approaches whereby this intervention fits the context and the situation of the Pacific. So what this intervention is set up to do is to, one, a regional open source platform is deployed with global coalition partners being mobilized to support connectivity, especially for marginalized groups. The platform will be based on Moodle, and the reason for this is because it is used in the Pacific and it's open source, and it will be easy for the Pacific to adapt it to country-specific needs. Secondly, it would allow for the Pacific to develop a repository for digitized curriculum-aligned resources to be hosted on this platform. It could support distance learning based on different technology, such as online platforms, TV or radio programs, as well as the introduction of open education resources for the Pacific to fill the gaps of curricular courses and content required by distance learning. And the third intervention is about scaling up efforts of countries in developing capacities of teaching staff to use these resources and tools. And a lot of the presentation today, as well as the questions, it really did touch upon training and investing in capacity building of teachers, of support in terms of ICT. So for the Pacific, it would focus on teacher training under low-tech distance learning scenarios, teacher training resources, and ensure that they are provided with the resources and supported to understand the resources that are available on the Moodle platform. As I said before, the Waka Moana LMP is an effort to establish within existing infrastructures within the University of the South Pacific. So this project is building on projects that have already been developed in the Pacific, as per in which our key speaker had touched upon. So about the nature of this partnership, some of the key features for everyone to understand is that in October 2020, the UNESCO Pacific States and USP entered into the partnership to strengthen 6 island countries' education systems in sustaining learning during a crisis. The commitment to coordination at all levels of this partnership is key, and this commitment is through frequent technical and update meetings between the 2 implementing agencies and inclusive dialogue with national education institutions of each country to ensure engagement, to ensure implementation and well management of this project. So the 6 countries involved have the advantage of USP's existing regional campuses for sustainability efforts, and will be linking the remote school sites directly with USP campuses, because the USP is hosting the Waka Moana. So access for students would not be a problem in this case for the 6 Pacific Island country. In addition, each country will have 1 piloted school with access accounts given to teachers and students to access their learning management account as results of this partnership. So for countries like Tuvalu and Kiribati with limited internet connectivity, they can explore how their telecommunication providers can create partnership with their telecommunication providers. And this has been a practice here in Samoa. So we also want to explore those. Some of the key features of the Waka Moana, I don't think I need to go into detail on the key features, but it would provide for the Pacific offline radio programs in order to strengthen education as well as online learning. And the online learning is really looking at how we can breach the gaps with the curriculum. How do we introduce open education resources and media resources to strengthen the curriculum, as well as the delivery of courses of education in Samoa. What is key in this, which is a key feature and I want to emphasize it, is the professional development and learning for teachers and IT support and staff and educators. So This project will have a key component, which is training workshops, and it is training on the use of technology for enhanced learning. It is about training the educators on curating of relevant materials and designing relevant lessons for students. Also important is that several Pacific countries have had experience of closing their schools and reopening their schools. So extending into the homes, connecting schools to parents and community will also be trialed in the Waka Moana. Some of the challenges that we are already facing include travel restrictions, and within countries, as we had the experience of Kiribati, this is challenging, traveling within island, given the oceans and the distance. It has been challenging in terms of engagement. How do we engage with the implementing partners, engaging with at the national level with teacher training institutions, with pilots, with parents and communities. So these are the real challenges that we're facing when we are implementing ICT for education projects. And one last challenge that I've just added in, so Toan, I didn't have before, is the continuity of support. So once the financing grant is completed, how do countries build from there? And just in summary, and tying all this back to the theme of this session, is that the Waka Moana platform really does exemplify different modules of partnerships that support innovative financing for all the different partnerships that this session is supposed to touch upon. But the ultimate goal of all the partnerships and the Waka Moana is really to strengthen resilience of Pacific education systems to continue learning. And on that note, thank you very much.
Thank you, Reetina. This was a very insightful presentation on the processes and challenges of international development partnerships. The GPE is a key funder of education projects in the world, and I hope that our government audiences will have found this presentation useful. So now we move on to the last sub-theme on resource mobilization, which is really key. Identification, mobilization, and for effective resources to deliver ICT and education interventions. It's important to recognize that the important aspects of resource mobilization go beyond just money to technical and human factors. Our next speaker, Daniel McFarlane from the International Telecommunication Union, or ITU, is the project officer for GIGA, an ambitious project to connect every school in the world to the internet. Daniel is an experienced social scientist, lecturer, and consultant. His focus is on digital technologies, social and economic impact, and how to build inclusive digital economies. This presentation will focus on how ITU is helping to increase connectivity in Asia and the Pacific through its Smart Islands and GIGA initiative. Over to you, Daniel.
Thank you, Toan, and thank you, UNESCO, for inviting me to this session. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Excellent, excellent. And apologies for the kind of stereotypical island picture, just something that I regularly dream of during Bangkok lockdowns. So as Toan has mentioned, I'm going to speak about two things today, Smart Islands and the GIGA Connecting Schools Initiative, which are two projects of the ITU, which really focus on resource mobilization and the development of strong partnerships. So I'll begin with Smart Villages, which is a whole of government approach for rural digital transformation. And it's based on this sort of understanding of sort of essentially four elements of limited access to broadband and digital services in remote islands, particularly limited broadband connectivity, understanding of insufficient affordability of devices and connectivity, insufficient digital skills, and limited digital services, or locally, platforms and applications that address local challenges. And through this whole of government approach, we seek to address these issues. The ITU approach, the proposed approach for smart islands, is evidence-based policymaking, leading to future-proof and integrating emerging technologies. It should be partnership-driven and with a whole government approach as its end goal. We see it as an innovative solution, produces an integrated platform to deliver SDG-related services. And the focus is women and children, farmers, government officers, students and teachers, as well as health workers. And the schools and health system is our starting point. This integrates many aspects. So as I said, it's a whole of government approach. It builds on common ICT building blocks, with a focus on producing low costs, better scalability, and multi-sector collaboration and partnerships with the end goal of producing an integrated platform to deliver SDG-related services. We have developed a pilot of smart villages in Nigeria, and we seek to emulate that model in Pacific Islands. So let me turn now to the GIGA project, which is a partnership between the ITU and UNICEF to connect every school in the world to the internet, as well as every young person to opportunities, information, and choice. Essentially, GIGA is a convener between funding opportunities and connectivity projects for schools in disconnected areas, and ultimately their communities as well. So we see GIGA as sitting between funders and supporters. So it helps funders hold governments and providers to account through clear target setting, timeline management. And on the other side, partner countries. So GIGA provides grants and technical advisory services to help governments in project preparation, and also facilitates interaction with providers, who are often our members. So GIGA enables relevant regulation, establishes and shares best practices in mapping connectivity, demand, and identification of funding, project preparation, project delivery, and post-delivery device adoption and empowerment. So this speaks to the 4 pillars of GIGA, which is firstly mapping. We see this as a really foundational step, and it's about resolving information gaps with real-time connectivity maps of schools. So based on that, we can understand the gaps and where we need to dedicate, build solutions, build plans, and develop financing solutions. So, which leads to the next step, financing, which is about stacking layers of public and private finance to de-risk investment and move capital out to the edges. And that coincides with the Connect pillar to build new regulatory frameworks and structuring common bids with government partners. And all this should lead to the final goal, which is empowering young people and communities. And so that's about partnering to ensure young people, young persons have access to information and opportunity and choice. And so UNICEF plays a very important role in this with Reimagine Education, as well as UNESCO and other agencies that work on grassroots empowerment and development of education. So I'll finish with a few slides on the financing. We see that small island states, and especially landlocked countries in Asia and Pacific, have a variety of financing challenges in terms of connectivity. And the mapping is an important sort of stepping stone to addressing those issues, because the magnitude of the challenge will determine the financing solution that we would adopt or we would recommend. We also recognize that there are established financing sources. So, of course, innovative approaches are necessary, but we should look at also tapping into existing sources. And universal service funds are are prevalent across the region. They are largely funded by levies on revenue or license auctions, and they've been established in many of the sort of potential giga countries in Asia and the Pacific. So we think of them as one of the first considerations, but there are issues to be addressed. Many USF funding sources have low disbursement rates. There can be a misalignment with project fund objectives and actual projects. And there may be a lack of monitoring and transparency. So these matters need to be addressed if we're going to leverage these universal service funds to deliver education. And we also think a whole of government approach, linking these funds with education outcomes, working with the ministries of education to deliver connectivity to schools will be very important. Blended finance and bonds is something the GIGA project looks at a lot, but it requires examination in the local context. Blended finance, which leverages philanthropic capital to attract commercial capital, has been quite prevalent in some parts of the world, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. In Asia and Pacific, India and Indonesia have been gaining momentum in regard to blended finance, and we would like to explore opportunities outside of those countries as well, but it will depend on the local context. Bonds, which have been talked about already in today's earlier presentations, are a very interesting option, and we do seek to explore that as well. Those mechanisms of financing are important for CapEx and building the infrastructure. However, we also need to explore sustainable business models to maintain networks in rural communities. So there are models that are available, and we need to examine them in the local context, especially in different Pacific contexts. Franchising models, which have been developed well in India and Indonesia. We have the Pacific model, the wholesale model of the Pacific in the Pacific Islands, which deserves attention. Open access network solutions, which have been deployed in Asia and the Pacific, and community network models. Some have had varying degrees of success, and it's our intention to evaluate them and to understand where they can work most effectively. All right, I will, hopefully I'm within time, and I'll wrap it up there and look forward to any questions regarding GIGA or the Smart Islands initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Smart Islands and GIGA are two very important initiatives to establishing the fundamental connectivity that we need for ICT and education initiatives. One key aspect that you may have seen in the mapping that was mentioned by Daniel, as well as in the USF model, is the importance of data. And also in all the other, many of the other presentations this morning. And that is the focus for our next presenter on the education data for resource mobilization. Tawanka Netsoro is the education data team leader at the Pacific community. He has numerous years of experience on various areas in the education sector in Fiji, focusing on access to quality education, sanitation, hygiene, and most recently in the education quality and assessment program. So over to you, Tawanka.
Thank you, Toan. Greetings to you all, and I guess this is the last presentation, so it is always the challenge to do that after listening to all the presentations. This is a presentation that is going to be done on behalf of the Education Quality and Assessment Program, one of the divisions of the Pacific Community of SPC. I'll start off with sharing some of our outcomes and priorities in our plans that is mainly focused on data and ICT. Our main outcome is that more national ministries of education and other key institutions increase the use of information for policy development, and implementation, planning, and management. And we have our key results that more ministries of education or departments of education they implement and maintain education management information system, which is the main tool for provision of information that can be used for reporting and also for decision making. Our priorities are that ECAP supports coordination and development of countries' IT systems and MES policies. MES policies are also one of the important areas that is very much linked to IT systems, and provides IT systems, data auditing, and software advice and training, including MES. Education data priorities in ECAP also on ECAP conducting data quality assessment program. It is a kind of framework where we assess the systems that are in the countries, especially the MES systems, and also other systems that they use for getting data or producing data. We also provide advice and technical support on the enhancement of national education databases and implement enhancements to PACSIM. So we also have a MES system in ECAP. We call it the PACSIM, so that is the Pacific Schools Information System, Management System, and we are trying to include this in the country so that they can update the generic data. And it's also used as a tool for some of our assessment programs. Just to explain a bit on experiencing in education ICT support in the identification and prioritization of country ICT budget in national budget education plans. So it's trying to get countries to identify the budget that they are in their plans. Using data quality assessment framework and MES situation analysis for each country to highlight strategies for implementation of ICT in national education budgets. And support activities in the use of ICT budget for building features that assist in the interrogation of database for data analysis, dissemination, and reporting. As you see from these three, that the financing is mainly on trying to get the countries to realize or see what is in their plans and use that, using some tools to make them be able to identify those things that are in their plan and also merge up them in a kind of regional approach. On sustainability, medium to long-term ICT plans with ECAP for the Pacific Island countries. And that's where PPRD comes in, the Pacific Regional Education Framework that the Minister had alluded to in his opening remarks. And those are, we have through PPRD for long-term plans for the region priorities. And continuous capacity development, which is one of our strengths for incoming MES and statistical officers and the users, capacity development for incoming and also for existing MES and statistical officers and the users, and providing advice and support on developing robust and user-friendly MES system. Why I'm saying that that is our strength is because we get in those that are very much experienced in MES in their own countries or systems in their own countries, and also who have worked in the region to develop and strengthen MES. Education statistics, our main problem is having past year data to fill in data gaps and for up-to-date data. And related problem to that is having robust system that can provide tables for national, regional, and international reporting. That is a problem. There are gaps, there's capacity that is lacking to work out on how to analyze and report data, and having basic standard tables that can be built into the database. So there's a lack of programmers, and the use of analyzed data in MES to fill in UIS questionnaires, be prepared for PPRD monitoring and having reliable data and timely data for national monitoring. So that is the related problem to the main problem. And I will focus more on the US questionnaires as we can see that from that we are able to answer to the SDG goals. Our key stakeholders are the Ministries of Education, UNESCO Institute of Statistics, Statistics for Development Division of SPC, and also there are also UNICEF and other Asian Development Bank and other key stakeholders that are part of our work. On the structure of resource mobilization, when it comes to financing SPC support Pacific Island countries in the development of the National Education Plan as outputs, through the use of DQF, as I've already alluded to, and other forms of assessment. We also support Pacific countries in identifying parts of their national education budget that can be dedicated towards the work of collecting and processing data. And ICAP also budget, we also have budget on all activities related to country training, visits, which is more virtual at the present state. On the using of ICT as the main tool, human capabilities, engage consultants to develop statistical tables from EMIS, engaging a full-time education statistician, so getting the capabilities in so that we can be able to provide a capacity building in the Pacific. Identification of developers within the region. For example, using the expertise from ministries of education in Fiji and Vanuatu to assess and develop prototype of EMI system in other countries that may need support in this in the Pacific. Assisting developers in their work on EMIs. So this is the work that we do, trying to get in developers, working with them, in even if they are funded by other sources of fund or bilateral or multilateral. Human capacities, building the focal persons approach within the region. We have a focal person approach where each country have a focal person to work with us, regional workshops to address capacities. So working with, right now we are working with Vanuatu in building the capacity of the new officers coming in there so that they can be able to interrogate their database, EMIs especially in this case. Working individually with countries through capacity building, as I've already alluded to. So the result is there. You can see the improvement in the UIS data collection. In the last 2 years, we've seen improvement. You may see that there's a fall from 2009 to 2000. It's just because we are comparing with data right now with data that was collected at the end of last year. If we compare with data that is collected at the same time as this date next year, you will be able to see an increasing trend in this as we improve on data collection using the US questionnaires as we compare with the same time last year. So completion of status of education report is something also support. Progress in monitoring of PACREF and data for SDG. COVID-19 data and collection is as was done earlier during COVID-19, and also on the development of on the publications of each country, whether it's annual report tables or statistical digests. There's a great support in doing this, and capacity building into how they can improve on that, using programmers or using expertise within the region or those who are not in the region who can work with the countries. So showing that in a map, we can see through our monitoring, we have the color coding there for all the countries. So compared to last year, we have improved a lot with more greens, and we are working with 2 countries now on data validation, and from there it goes to the US. When it's green, then the submission has been given to the UNESCO Institute of Statistics. So from status of being red, so there's no US submission. We try and work with the countries on trying to get them to have their questionnaires completed. Then we look at the questionnaires, review them, and that is when we are in the yellow stage. And when it comes to the green stage, that is when the questionnaires are submitted to UIS by the countries. Lessons learned, important lessons that we learned from here. Important to strengthen monitoring of activities for quality reporting, to DFAT, MFAT, continuous mobilization finance within the Pacific region, and that will be mobilized by Pacific Community, SPC, through its division, ICAP. Important to work collaboratively with our partners, UNESCO, UNICEF, World Bank, and ADB. The growing of the expertise of developers. I'm always emphasizing this as this is one of our focus work, is to work with developers and work on capacity building and others for skills development and setting of systems and developing the systems. It's important. This is an important exercise for regional development of ICT in education. Identification of focal persons within the region is important for transfer of knowledge, skills, responsibilities, and for the sake of sustainability. And building capacity as a priority in national education plans and for regional and international goals. These are human capacity and capacity of the systems to be able to provide the information, analyze the data that can be used for reporting, or especially on the SDGs and the backgraph that are coming up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tawanka. It is indeed quite a difficult position to be in to present, be the last presentation of the day, but I think you did a great job. And you highlighted a very important topic of data. Indeed, technology has increased our ability to collect data, and it is something that is very important to enable innovative financing going forward. In respect of the time of our speakers and audience, I apologize, but we will have to skip the Q&A to keep in schedule. So now we'll move on to the last session. I'd now like to invite Nyi Nyi back to provide us the closing remarks in summary of the conference and share our next steps. Over to you, Nyi Nyi.
Thank you, Toan. Can you see me or is it okay? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Toan. So first of all, I would like to thank all the speakers for their relevance and insightful presentations. Thanks to all the participants for their participation as well and their active engagement as well. Also, thanks to my colleague for organizing this event on such an interesting and tangible. So I would like to close or conclude this conference with a brief summary of the key takeaway message that we discussed in the three sections, and the subject of innovative financing as well as to present the next step for the project. The keynote speech provides a great overview of the background for this conference. For that, I also wanted to thank our His Excellency for the Minister of Education, Tonga, for that also. We are very glad to hear about the region situations and progress in education with an emphasis on the Pacific Regional Education Framework, REF, we call it, I think, as a key regional strategy on education development. In the section 1, they introduce this project and the UNESCO work on supporting SDG 4 with the ICT in education in Asia and the Pacific. The official launch of the UNESCO policy planning guides and the financing planning resource to now provide policymakers with the added support for the developing world-costed ICT in the education program and project. In section 2, they gather the country delegate to share their relevant experience and learning from ICT in the education policy planning, especially in light of COVID-19 pandemic. I think this section provides great introduction of the Pacific context for the other education stakeholders working in the region to learn about the progress, the gaps, and the challenge. So as part of the preparation for this conference, the Thematic Brief on Innovative Financing of ICT in Education was conducted. And thank you for that also to provide the evidence-based understanding of the topic, which is very helpful. We were very happy to learn about the preliminary finding in the section 3, and I look forward to seeing the final brief contribution to the partnership and resource mobilization of ICT education discussed today. Under the subject 1 in the financing instrument for development, we learned that about innovative financing as a way to repurpose traditional financing mechanism to generate greater social impact. Innovative financing examples include the pay for success financing model, application of women entrepreneurs, and a recommendation for the policymaker of great learning for all of us, I would say. The importance of partnership for facilitating development in the education has been highlighted by the COVID-19 pandemic, and we discussed it in the subsequent 2 also. Learning from this section of the effective partnership intervention, as well as perspective from the donor organization and development partner, offer us insight on how and what we need to focus on to build effective partnerships. And then also resource mobilization discussed under the subtheme was also very timely topic. The GIGA initiative set a great example of working with multi-sector partner on enhancing the investment to increase digital connectivity and reducing the digital divide. Using the education data for resource mobilization was another best practice. Example, using innovative approach to strengthen the monitoring of activity for sustainable mobilization of finance within the Pacific region. So the next step, we will launch the Thematic Brief for Innovative Finance for ICT education within the coming month, right, Toan? And then continue to update on the PPG appear with the new content and also they become very available. We also support ICT education policy planning and financing in the region through online workshop we plan to do. So to conclude this, it is my great pleasure to see various initiatives and the potential happening in the region, Pacific region and the beyond. So we really appreciate all the knowledge shared today. It's a very enhancing and also interesting for us, all of us. I hope you are able to take away practical lesson to apply your work. And once again, I would like to make a congratulations to all this group of conference. So with this, I would like to pass the floor back to my colleague Toan. So Toan, over to you.
Thank you, Nyi Nyi. I must say it has been a very information-packed 3 hours, and we have managed to cover such a wide array of topics and perspectives on this very important topic of innovative financing. As the Honorable Minister prompted in his speech, COVID-19 has thrust us into a new era with vastly magnified inequalities and challenges, but also great opportunities. We more clearly see what needs to be urgently addressed. But to succeed, we must take radical action to build strong, constructive partnerships and effectively and sustainably make progress towards SDG 4. I hope this conference has been one small step forward towards building such partnerships and for this region and beyond. With that, I would like to officially close this conference. Thank you for your participation and stay safe.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nyi Nyi. Thank you all.
Thank you. Great to see you.
All the best to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wong. Thank you, Nyi Nyi. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Solomon Islands.
Bye.
Thank you, Bangkok office.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Matthew.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.